Indoctrination, by definition, is teaching somebody to, in this case, it would be accept or dislike something uncritically. If you say you don't want kids to be taught to endorse this thing,
but you're right,
then
as a parent,
kids shouldn't be taught to be completely against this thing.
Kids can be taught whatever they want by their parents.
Okay, obviously. However, in principle, they would need to establish what is sinful about being gay. What actually makes it a sin?
They don't have to establish that for you. They can tell you to go read the Bible, and they can talk to you about their religion,
and
that's
what?
their
You want to know what the
justification
answer is? Because God said so.
Okay, cool. Then
it's dogmatic. It's
God
indoctrination.
That's not indoctrination. That's not indoctrination.
That's literally
that's what religion
accepting
is.
it uncritically.
That is what religion is.
It's literally God said so. That's uncritical. That's ultimate authority.
That is what religion is. I'm not, listen, and I don't have, you're asking me to defend something that's not my position? You know I had to dance. Even when I have the guests, it's mandatory. I don't make the guests dance, but we're going to have to figure out, I don't know, maybe we put a disco ball in here, and before we debate it out, before we duke it out figuratively, no, it's going to be nothing but love. But before we do that, everybody has to dance. Warm up the room. Hunter's here. I'm going to intro him in a second. So we have Hunter Avallone today. We see the world very differently in many respects. I'm sure there will be some common ground here and there. I think when there's this perception that people disagree on everything, oftentimes that's not the case. So we'll see if we can find it. Here's what we're going to talk about today. And then I'm just going to remind you guys about something before we get into the topics. We're going to talk about body count. I have seen a lot of Hunter's commentary, and we've covered some of it here. You can go back and check my reaction to some of his stuff, but he goes after Myron, Fresh and Fit, Sneeko, has a different opinion than them, and a different opinion from me in many respects. So I'm going to talk about body count, talk about toxic masculinity. That's not toxic at all. Gender activism, I think, is an important issue that's going on right now. What does that look like? Is it activism? Do we have a different definition of what that means? What is gender? What is sex? All that stuff. We're going to get into that. Wokeness in schools and in the military, I think is, I saw some tweets from Hunter that I thought were really interesting. So we're going to dig into that. The impact of feminism. I want to talk about some food stuff. Hunter's like, what? Don't worry, we'll get there. And Andrew Tate, the Tate effect, as I like to call it. I don't know if he has an opinion on Andrew Tate, but we're going to find out. So with no further ado, I would like to welcome Hunter Avallone. I'm going to do my Manect plug in a little bit later, but y'all get in the chat today. Don't get mean, but get feisty. Get your opinions out there. Deli's in the house. We're going to read the super chats. I will check in with Deli probably 3 times throughout the show. So we want to hear from you. Hunter, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
So you came all the way from
the Maryland, West Virginia area.
All the way from the Maryland, West Virginia area to tell me that I'm wrong about body count.
Pretty much, actually not just about body count, just to tell you that you're wrong
about everything. Awesome.
Yes.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, thank you for coming.
Sure.
One of my goals on this show is to showcase that people with very different views of the world, of different things, can sit at a table and have a conversation. And that doesn't mean it won't get hot, won't get spicy, but there's mutual respect here, hopefully by the end of the show as well is my intention. That's what this space is about. I think you did a video of me once and you were like, okay, she doesn't do the name calling. That's not her.
Yeah.
That's not her.
I'm going to be nicer.
I'm going to be nicer. Exactly. So I want to talk about, first and foremost, I want people to understand who you are, what you're about. They know your content now because I've covered it. You had a political transformation. You used to be, I don't know what you would call yourself prior, but my understanding is some people were referring to you as alt-right. My sense is you were conservative. Then I think you shifted to more centrist as you defined it. And I don't know where you land now. So why don't you tell us what politically you are now? And this isn't just going to be a political discussion, but politics weaves through everything. I tell you that all the time. What is your political leaning and what was the motivation of that transformation for you?
Sure. Well, I would consider myself a social democrat now, which in the United States, that's definitely more left than a centrist position. But if we're talking internationally and especially online, that is still pretty much a centrist position. So when I hear leftist, which I'm not myself a leftist, that's usually referring to people that are communist, socialist, that kind of stuff. I'm not a fan of that. I tend to find socialism and communism to be pretty unrealistic, kind of like a pipe dream.
Can you align yourself with somebody? Like, is there a politician? Is there someone that you hope runs for office that somebody can visualize that? Because that's hard to, for people who are used to seeing the world in a very polarized way. I don't know that everyone can contextualize that. Who do you want to run for president?
Well, I don't know if I could give you a specific example of somebody who is a social democrat, but a lot of social democrat policies are carried out in the Scandinavian countries, where it's basically just you're still in favor of capitalism, you're still in favor of there being markets, obviously. However, you're also in favor of stronger social safety nets to a degree.
Socialized medicine.
Socialized medicine would be one of them. Ideally, it would be a public option and a private option. I don't really like the idea of just like uprooting people's private option and then just forcing them to use the public. Ideally, that would be the case, though. And a lot of these Scandinavian countries, they have their problems, but they also have really successful economic mobility and whatnot because of the policies that are induced.
So why the switch for you?
From conservative?
Yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, I'll clarify. I was a conservative. I was not alt-right.
Yeah. Well, I imagine people label conservatives alt-right no matter what. Like,
well, it's like
just
all
vomit
the same.
out the word.
Yeah.
Of course.
It's like you're conservative, alt-right, Nazi. It's all just like the same.
Yeah.
But no, I was pretty much like a social conservative, I would call myself. I still don't really focus heavily on economic stuff. So at the time, I was actually very opposed to a lot of the things that I now am in favor of, specifically like LGBT individuals. I was very much of the opinion that, biology, or they're denying biology, they're denying reality, which I actually understand still to a large degree why people have that perception. I think that there's a lot of lefties on Twitter specifically who are just like the worst type of people. And they are constantly positing just like delusional views, oh yeah, you can identify as a different sex and all this weird shit. Like, so I totally understand the bad stereotype there, but I would mainly focus on going after the more extreme elements of the left. When I was still conservative myself, I voted for Trump in 2016.
Interesting.
Yeah, mostly just your typical kind of run-of-the-mill conservative stuff, not really in favor of Black Lives Matter, anti-LGBT, that kind of stuff.
And then you transitioned to, the place that you are now ideologically. Why?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was just a long process. A lot of people, I think, are under the impression that I did this 180 out of nowhere. But truth be told, I was in a complicated spot in my own personal life, just with having a baby and whatnot. And, I was pretty worried about that. That was a pretty big step for me. And I kind of had an idea on how it was going to happen. And then it happened, and it was completely different than what I thought. And I realized, because I felt so strongly about my perception of what it was going to be like to have a child, I realized that I was so wrong about something that I thought I was so right about. I mean, for months on end, I thought that I was correct in my understanding and perception of things, and it turned out to be wrong. And I think that kind of put me in a place, even subconsciously a little bit, where I was sort of thinking, I wonder if there's anything else that I could be wrong about that I'm really confident that I'm not wrong about. And from there, it was kind of just a domino effect. I did have some discussions with other lefty liberal types who were presenting me with other pieces of evidence that I hadn't previously seen.
Yep.
And from there, yeah, I mean, throughout all of 2019 into like mid 2020, I was transitioning my content and my views.
So do you feel that having a child, because it's interesting, because I also have a 3-year-old. You have 2 children. One is a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
And then a 2-year-old, you explained to me before the show started. Do you think that having a child has something to do with that? Because I had a child, in a crazy time, right? We had, COVID struck. It was a very odd time to have a child, as you might have had a similar experience. It was just very crazy what went on. And I think for some people, it caused a transition. In some cases, it caused people to get, if they were conservative to begin with, they got more conservative. Did that have an impact on you, having a child, and then having a child in this time period that we've just gone through? Has in other words, the last couple of years informed where you stand now politically? Because it certainly did that for me.
Right. Well, I don't think that I will, obviously having kids has changed me for the better. That's definitely true, I think. But I wouldn't really say because I had a kid that sort of shifted my views. It was more so that, like I said, I was kind of under the impression that I wasn't going to be a good dad, or I don't know if this is the right path for me, or I was really scared and unsure. And then just being confronted by the fact that I was so wrong there. So it wasn't so much like having a child caused me to like feel more empathetic, and then it wasn't really like that. It was more so just the overall experience of me being wrong initially about having a kid.
Well, I think like evolution does happen in people. I can respect that. I think people need to figure out who they are, what they value. And I think sometimes when you face people in good debates, sometimes you walk away from that debate and you feel stronger in terms of how you feel, and sometimes you walk away from that debate and you're questioning how you felt before, and that is a part of human evolution. Like, I think I actually fully support that concept, if it's authentic, not if it's
Right.
someone who's trying to be a crowd pleaser, which also happens in media. For me,
Yes.
I will say that the last couple of years, I was kind of always a conservative. I dip between conservative, libertarianism. I left the Republican Party because I felt the Republican Party wasn't doing enough in the name of freedom and guaranteeing people's liberties and caring about debt and deficit and all the things that Republicans claim to care about. So I left that kind of around the Tea Party time when I saw that there was an organic movement out there that did care about these things and the GOP establishment didn't. The last couple of years for me, and we'll get to politics at the end of it, but seeing the onslaught on freedom, like when I witnessed the mandates and when I witnessed all of that evolve, and we'll get to your take on that stuff as well, it made me like a firecracker. It really awoke in me a desire, because I have this child, to protect that child's freedom above all else,
Right.
to make decisions for himself, for his own life. And I felt like we were increasingly living in a world where crony capitalism and government holding hands with big business was a problem.
Yeah.
So that's why I had asked about that. I want to start with, this channel loves these topics related to dating and relationships, so we will get to politics, but I want to start with body count. And we talk a lot about body count here.
Yeah.
You have a lot of videos where you go after, like I said, Sneeko, Fresh and Fit. So talk to me about, can we both agree that women care less about males' body count than men care about women's body count? That men
generally a little. I mean, I can agree with that, but I don't think it's necessarily as big of a gap as a lot of people make it out to be. So they've done surveys and studies, and they found that most women felt like a man was probably too promiscuous if he had over 14 sexual partners, or if he had over 15. I'm sorry, if he had over 15 sexual partners. Men felt that the woman was probably too promiscuous if she had over 14 sexual partners. So the gap was quite slim there, but generally speaking, yeah, I think that that's probably the case.
Let me just refute that just for 1 second, because that's not what my research shows, and that's not what you hear women saying all the time. If you talk to women out there, women will very often say, and there's a double standard here as far as I'm concerned. It's just a reality. If you ask women all the time, we show panel after panel after panel, and you say to them, do you care if this guy, has a high body count? They'll say no, as long as it's in the past, right? As long as that's not something that's trickling into their present. If you ask guys if you care about a woman's body count, 9.9 out of 10 times they're going to say they do.
Well,
now,
I mean, sorry to cut you off, but obviously the statistics aren't going to speak for everybody. I mean, that's why it's statistical. It's talking more about a broad
But if we
collection
made a
of
broad
information,
generalization,
but-
I don't think you could say that. I think the broad generalization would be that the overwhelming majority of women don't care, and the overwhelming majority of men do care. Now, we can say that's a double standard, but I think that's a reality. And I think there's whether you want to say good reason or not, to me it's good reason. I can understand biologically why that happens. But here's what I want to get to, the why of should they care. Because you often talk about, you'll go after these guys in, the red pill space and say, why are these guys so concerned? And please, if I'm taking you out of context, tell me. But my understanding is that you kind of go after them as like, well, why do you care so much about the female body count?
Right.
Do you understand why men generally do care about a woman's body count?
I think that there are various different reasons why, or things that they will say.
Why do you think they actually care about it, though? If you're willing to admit that they do, why?
Well, first of all, of course, I'm willing to admit that they do.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'm not even denying that at all. Why they do, a lot of the times, based on what I'm hearing from Fresh and Fit and whatnot, it seems to be this perception that women who have had prior sex partners are ran through, or have become loose, or are somehow damaged, or even defiled. I mean, we talk a lot about like the pure woman. We want the women to be pure. I don't like that mentality, because I feel like it bases women's value on their sexuality. I don't think that a woman having sex means that she's now defiled or impure. And obviously, as far as like the claim that it makes women loose, that's just factually untrue. I mean, you can look at literally what happens to the female body during sex. She doesn't become looser.
I don't think they mean it anatomically. I think they mean loose the way I use the word loose, which
Like
is that
easy
you're
to
not
get in bed
terribly
with?
picky. that you're not terribly picky. You're not terribly, particular about who you decide to share that very intimate experience with. That's my understanding. You have to let them speak for themselves.
And before we move on, I just want to say, like, I also have even caught flack from more left-leaning people because I'm also of the opinion that, yes, if you're being incredibly promiscuous, jumping in and out of bed, now I would say this for both men and women, maybe we would disagree there, but I think if you're being incredibly promiscuous, jumping in and out of bed, treating sex with just complete and total carelessness, I do think that speaks incredibly poorly of your overall character. I think that something like sex, it is a big deal. It should be seen as something that holds value and potential risks as well. And I think that a degree of discretion there is incredibly important. So obviously, no, I'm not in favor of like women jumping out of bed with everybody or men jumping in and out of bed with everybody.
Well, that is what's happening though. I mean, that panel after panel, and I do a lot of coverage of the Whatever podcast. I love that show. If they're in the chat today, yay. But I do coverage of this because I like to hear from women in their own words. And you will repeatedly hear women saying, oh, my body count, it's 35. I don't even know. I can't remember. There's so many women, and I'm a little older than you are, so I can remember a time that was a little bit different. And something has happened to women where that is now seen as a badge of honor. So it's not.
What age bracket are you talking about?
Well, I'm 43.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. So I mean, what age bracket
open
are these
about that.
women who are...
early 20s, mid 20s, talking about 35, 15, 25. I mean, if you're in double digits at that age, there's a problem. So when you say they're saying it, so then maybe they're lying.
No. I'm not saying that they're not telling the truth. Individuals are going to have their own experiences, and yes, I'm sure there are.
Let me just finish this though, and then you can get back to the stats on this. But I want to say, because you mentioned a few things, I don't want to lose. You talked about Fresh and Fit talking about how they're run through, they're damaged. That is a reality. They are. A lot of those women are deeply, deeply damaged. They were my friends, growing up. Women are the vast majority of women. And remember, we're going to talk about this. There are going to be outliers, but I'm talking about, you have to speak a bit in generalizations because we won't be able to have any conversation without that. The vast majority of women are not comfortable in sexual encounters where there's no emotion involved. And I cannot tell you how many women that cried tears at night because they felt that it was a badge of honor to be promiscuous because feminism told them to, or modern life told them to, or they were trying to act like, men around them who were behaving badly, but they were told, oh, it's a man's world, I have to mimic that behavior. And then those women would go home and they would cry themselves to sleep at night because they didn't get that text the next day. Right. Or they didn't get what they needed as a woman, which is different from a man because biology does matter. We'll get to that in a second. And as a result, they were damaged, and they brought that baggage into the next relationship and that scarring into the next relationship. And that's just true. So I think when these men are talking about, like you talked about purity, and I want to address the things you're saying because I think these are points that are valid to debate. When these guys talk about purity, it's not creepy. I remember one video you said it was creepy. It doesn't read that way to me at all. The way that it reads to me is they're looking at somebody and saying, this is somebody who's going to be less jaded by pretty horrific experiences of hopping in and out of bed with guys who don't love you and don't care about you. You are going to carry some of that weight with you. This is still
based on the faulty assumption that women in general are just hopping in and out of bed, being more promiscuous. The main problem that I have is I think that, again, you're correct. There are women out there who have had plenty of sexual partners and are being way too promiscuous and hurting themselves and, yes, becoming damaged because of it.
That's who they're talking about.
Well, but those are not that's not necessarily the majority of women.
So depends what you mean by promiscuous. Because
I'll explain. So, for example, there was a study that tracked college age men and women from 1990 all the way until 2010, and they found that the average body count of those individuals was around 3 to 4. This idea that women are just jumping in and out of bed, just in general, as a general rule, I don't agree with that. If you even look at like the younger generation, they're having sex less. So in 2010, it was like some 79% said that they had never had sex. Now it's up to 89%. So
what generation are you talking about? You're talking about meaning individuals who are like 15, 16 years old now, really young? You're talking about?
Yes, I'm talking 15 or 14 into early teenagers, or probably close to 20. I would have to double check. But overall sexlessness, especially among the general,
especially among men, by the way.
The younger, we'll talk about that. But the younger generation, they seem to be having less sex. So I feel like what you're doing is you're taking a story that you've heard, which again, I'm not saying they're lying, but then you're extrapolating that onto the broad majority. I don't think that women in general are out there trying to be promiscuous. I don't think that women in general are just necessarily promiscuous. And most of the data that we have right now doesn't really suggest that.
So you don't think that the introduction of birth control pills or any of that led to greater promiscuity among women than had been prior?
Well, I didn't say that. Obviously, introduction to birth control, if we're going to compare back to what, the 1950s
Well, that's what
till
I'm
now, we're
curious
probably going
about.
to see
What
a
is the
little bit of
comparison?
difference.
Because I can tell you, having been alive 20 years ago, there's a huge discrepancy in terms of not just how women behave when it comes to sex, but how they talk about it,
Well, there's
and
a
how
degree
they
of
wear that
sexual
badge of honor.
liberation there, though, right?
Well,
Because you have to think that
exactly,
now,
but that's the problem.
well, no, it's not, because I don't think that a lot of the times I almost feel like people treat women getting pregnant as like the punishment for her having sex. If
Well,
somebody
no, it's
is
accountability, though, right?
but that shouldn't be what holds her accountable. That shouldn't be like that's a
Why?
child, because that's another human being.
Right. So she
she's
should be
on-
accountable for her actions and not engage in sexual activity.
No,
unless
she should be. If she wants to engage in sexual activity, then she should be accountable by taking birth control.
Okay, so we can have a debate about birth control, whether we believe birth control has been good or bad for women. That's a separate conversation. But the reality is that with the introduction of birth control, with the introduction of this, what you just said, which is if you want to be, if you want to be accountable, rather than make a decision that you're not going to have sex unless it means something, unless you're willing to bear the risk of what comes with that, which prior to birth control being so prevalent was pregnancy. There was a much greater risk of pregnancy.
And there's still risks now, though.
There are
right?
still risks as well.
Because you brought them up. You
That's
just
right.
mentioned
There are
the
still risks as well. But birth control has changed the way women look at sex in very large part. I think they're much more willing to engage in sex that they otherwise would not have, because that risk has been lessened. It's just a reality of human thought, if you think about it. You have Plan B. You have a whole bunch of things that have arisen in society as a means to be a mechanism for women to be free to be more promiscuous with their bodies and with their behavior with lesser risk to them of pregnancy.
The lesser risk, yes, again, of pregnancy. But also, I mean, it's not just women using birth control to be promiscuous. There are plenty of married people or women in relationships who they don't want to have a baby at the time.
Yeah, but the vast majority of women taking birth control are taking it for two reasons. They're taking it, one, because of what medicine is today. So if you go to a doctor and you have anything from acne as a woman, I can tell you from, your irregular cycle, it's like, here's a pill for that. It's birth control that's disseminated. That's one reason they take it. That's medical, not related to pregnancy. And another one is because in college, out of college, there is a period of life where women tend to, be a little bit more fluid with their thinking, and they want that protection of that birth control.
Sure.
That's a reality.
It might be a reality for some, but again, that's not borne out by the numbers. So if we look again, like what I just said, from 1990 to 2010, 5,000 college students were tracked.
So
and
that's
they didn't
5,000 though. That's an extremely small sample size.
No, it's not. That's not an extremely
And
small.
it's
what
you're looking
matters
at
is
2010. We're talking about 2023.
okay. 2010 to 2023 is not that different.
Oh, come now. I mean, you
when
can look at.
do you want to talk about when women are being promiscuous?
You want to go 2010 back to the 1990s and talk to me about the difference? No.
Yeah, from the 1950s to
Not
2010.
1950s.
Of course, it's going to be different.
I was young in the 1990s. It was drastically different. I mean, there were women in my school that were promiscuous. Don't get me wrong, but they were very few and far between. They were looked upon by men as, okay, I'm not going to take this girl seriously because she doesn't care about her body. She doesn't take her own body seriously. Why should I? It was marginalized. It was not thought of highly. Those women were shamed in some ways. We can talk about shaming. We're going to get to that. But that behavior was not nearly as prevalent or worn with a badge of honor as it is today. There is no contest that today women are told repeatedly that promiscuity is their, rite of passage, that it's a man's world, and if you want to compete with a man, you should behave like a man, and men have that stage they go through in life, so why not you? That they are told to take birth control, that it will be liberating for them, and it will enable them to make different types of decisions. That is a reality. So you can talk about a sample size of 5,000. I don't know anything about the specifics of that study.
Well, I can give you another one if you'd like to, because there's another one done by the Institution of Family Studies, which looked at the male sexlessness being on the rise, like what we were kind of
That's true. I will attest to that.
And they found that the women were not actually becoming more promiscuous. Women's average amount of sexual encounters and sexual engagement has been incredibly steady since the early 2000s. It has not changed. And so if you're seeing any kind of increase in what appears to be promiscuity, a lot of the times it's concentrated to the same group of women or in the same area where some women are more promiscuous and those same women are being more promiscuous.
So what do you
This isn't spreading to all of women.
What do you say to women? I'm not saying every woman's promiscuous, and I'm not even saying that the vast majority of women are hopping into.
But you're
in and out
saying
of
that they're all being told to be promiscuous.
That's exactly right. I am saying they are getting the message that promiscuity is something that they should own, that it's a sign of female empowerment, that they would be able to make the same decisions as a man would. And, everybody talks about guys, how they go through that stage of like post-college, guys are going to be guys. We've heard that. I'm sure you heard that.
Yeah.
Women are now hearing that. And because we live in a society where it's always like compete with a man, be like a man, even though you're not wired like a man, you're not, no matter what you do, there is an increasing, growing number of women, is what I'm saying, that is feeling like that message is positive for them in some way. Not that they're necessarily even acting on it, but that
where is this happening? So
all over the
obviously,
place.
obviously, anybody
Everywhere.
saying being promiscuous is empowering or whatever, anybody saying that's an idiot. That's not true. It's not empowering to sleep around and let it, like I said, jumping in and out of bed.
That is what's being said.
Well, if it's being said, then that's bad advice.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I just mentioned tracked up to the early 2000s, now up to 2017, so we're past 2010 now. And yeah, they found that since the 2000s, women's rate of sexual activity, sexual encounters, has completely stayed steady. It is not this increase of female promiscuity.
So I'd have to look at that study. Obviously, I don't have it.
There's two different ones now, though, right? There's the one from the college, and there's one in women on general.
Women, listen, if you're looking at a study of women 10 plus years ago, that's a completely different population of women. What we have seen in what's gone on with women in the last decade has blown my mind, truthfully.
Well, this one was up to 2017, and they found that there was no increase.
I would love to see it. But I think my point is, regardless of that, the conversation about body count for me is not a conversation about, the vast majority of women are promiscuous. The vast majority of women are hopping in and out of bed with people. Mm-hmm. The conversation for me is just that when women do that, it's not a good look. Right? And it's not a good look, and guys don't like it. And the reason that guys don't like it is not because they're insecure or because of it's because they just don't.
But
they don't.
Why? What's the reason?
Why do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I do think that you have an argument to be made that the more sexual encounters you have, the more likely that you are going to suffer some kind of emotional negative response there. I think that that's honestly a valid concern. Baggage in a relationship is not usually very desired. But again, I think that kind of goes both ways. I think that I don't think women want a guy who has a lot of baggage.
But it doesn't go both ways because women don't care. The reason it doesn't go both ways is because we can sit here and analyze the situation and say, maybe you and I sit and say it should go both ways. Maybe you and I sit and say there shouldn't be a double standard here. But there is, because women and men care about different things.
But see,
so the reason the double standard exists is because women don't say, I care. Women control all of this, by the way. Women could step up and say, I care about guys' body count, and I'm not going to mess around with guys who have a high body count, and all the bad boys, the players, whatever you want to call them, the chads, would be sexless. Women don't make that decision. They sleep with those guys because they don't care about those numbers. Now, we can dig into the why of that. Maybe there's something biological there, but that is just the reality that we're dealing with.
I understand that for some women that's the reality, but I feel like you keep on doing the extrapolating certain qualities onto the vast majority of women. When you say women are doing this thing, that's not true. Women, on average, are not becoming more promiscuous.
Forget about
some
that.
Women
no. We're not talking about that, though. We're talking about whether women care about male body count.
And some women do, some women don't.
You don't think that it can be said that more women don't care? You don't think that that's a fair assessment?
Based on the numbers that I have seen, they, both men and women, said that their ideal amount of prior sex partners was around 7.
You're trying to say it's equal for men and women.
It was around 7.5 to 7.6.
That's not a reflection of reality.
Okay, it's from Healthline. That's obviously a medical institution here that's tracking this kind of thing.
That's like saying that Pfizer did the studies on the COVID vaccine. So, but we'll get to that.
Well, no, but this is the problem is I don't think it's fair to just write off the numbers because we see a lot of extreme examples. You turn on TikTok and you see a dumb feminist screaming about how she fucked 35 guys and that's actually super empowering. But those extreme examples, the loudest voices, right? Those don't necessarily speak for the majority.
But we're not talking
women
about that.
In general.
We're talking about the why. So if we say that guys do care, let's just say guys care about body count. You hear guys all the time saying,
I agree.
And especially guys in this space, right? We're talking about red pill space. They say they do care.
Sure.
I think that they care because whether you've been, I use the word loose not to mean physically, but in terms of anatomy, but loose in terms of your decision making, is a reflection of your values, is a reflection of who you are. Mm-hmm. I think guys oftentimes will separate women into play, and then who I'm going to be serious about. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes there are two categories. And if they're looking at a woman and saying, this is somebody I could be serious about, this is someone who I could take home to mom, this is someone who I may want to build a family with, it's very hard for them to have that woman also have had a very compromising past because their values matter. That's when that comes into play.
What would you define as like a compromising past? Because a lot of the times I wonder, are the red pill people talking about they want women to be virgins? Are they saying
so
just
I can only
haven't
speak for
been
myself.
super slutty in the past? Like,
I can only speak for
exactly?
myself. For me, that means that if you have a pattern as a female, if I were a guy looking at a woman, and if you had a pattern as a female of not pairing sex with emotion, that would be a red flag for me. I would be out the door. Because that shows me a pattern of behavior that you may continue. And I think there's a lot of comfort for men in women who are just unable to do that, right? They're just unable to go sleep with somebody if they don't care about them, if they don't have some emotion involved.
Right.
Because that woman is more likely to be loyal, faithful. She just is. The other one's going to be a wild card. I'm not saying they're going to cheat necessarily, but they have the ability to not pair sex with emotion, which in a guy's mind means, well, they did it before a bunch of times. This could happen again. They're capable of that behavior. So I think that's why they're looking at it like that. And for me, listen, I hear guys talk about virgin. I don't hear a lot of guys saying a woman has to be a virgin. I don't know that that's realistic. We're in the time we live in. Who's going to fit that description? I'm sure some religious people. I'm not saying no, but if I were a man, would I want to be with someone? I'm trying to flip the shoes. I'm not a man, but someone who was a virgin versus somebody who had a body count of 10. Virgin.
Well, sure, because
No question.
again, like what we said, a lot of the times more sexual encounters can contribute to additional baggage.
So that's
but what if we're talking about a woman who, say, has had prior sexual encounters? Maybe she's been like around 7 people before.
Okay.
So it's getting into territory where maybe the guy's a little hesitant. But what if she doesn't have any lasting emotional damage from that? What if it was, maybe 7 would be a little extreme, but what if it was like a couple prior relationships where she had
different.
sex? Is
I
that
think
different?
that's to me, I can say that's totally different because and it also depends on your age, right? I mean, I got married in my mid 30s. So, I got married late. So it wasn't like, I was just, 18 years old, got married. People do things at different stages of life. So I'm not saying that you can't have any type of past. What I am saying is the more your past houses, emotion separated from sex, a willingness to have a one-night stand here and there, the more problematic it is for a man to think about that. And I think a lot of it is that men are very visual. And I think, guys don't even want to hear about like who you dated. Like they're just like content to think like, okay, you woke up today and she's with me and end of story. I don't need to think about what happened before because it's hard to visualize that for them. And uncomfortable. And I think that's part of it. If they know you've been
fair for women though too. I mean, obviously if you're with a man, you don't really want to hear about his prior sexual engagements. You don't want to hear about his ex. Like that's like rule number 1,
Women
right?
chase bad boys all the time. So if they were so concerned about the bad boy and they couldn't handle it and that, they wouldn't chase them. So they do it. Their behavior shows otherwise because think about a high school setting. Think about a college setting. That guy who has the pick of the litter and, has done some stuff that maybe is not so moral and noble and isn't the guy saving himself for a woman, they chase him all the time. Now, there's a number of reasons why they do that. It's not just because part of it is because they're able to get the girls, and there's a suavity and a masculinity that comes with that. But women tell you in their behavior all the time that they don't care about this stuff by the attention, that the types of guys that get attention. So that's how I view it.
I understand that, and I definitely see where you're coming from. And I don't even entirely disagree with you. I don't. I think that you've raised a lot of good points, specifically the possibility of there being more baggage. Obviously, I agree with that. That's kind of almost a given. But again, like my main issue is just to be sure that we're not extrapolating this as if this is like the general woman population becoming slutty or whatever.
My concern is not, and I don't sit here and say, oh, this is a trend that's among all women, or but it is a growing trend.
But it's not.
No, it is though. But then why is a growing even if women, there is a changing perception about sex that women have. When you talk to women today versus you talked to women 15, 20 years ago, I taught in schools. I was an advisor to kids. I was an academic dean at one point. There is a lightness with which this stuff is spoken about and handled that didn't exist before. There was more of a sense that physical intimacy needed to actually be intimacy, and that these were decisions that should carry weight in your life. Even if you watch the television programming from 20 years ago, I can remember watching like 90210, and whether Brenda and Dylan were going to sleep together was a big storyline. So I think that what has happened is, and it's not, for me, it's not even about the behavior, it's about the mindset that has changed. And I think that's a growing problem among women. I would like to see more women saying, my body is valuable to me. I have value. That's part of my value. And I'm not going to share it with just anybody. That should be a message we're putting out there for women.
And I mean, obviously, having a perception, again, like that sex is just super cheap, kind of doesn't really matter. I do think that it's good to have discretion before you're sleeping with somebody. I've never been a fan of the hookup culture crap. I think that is honestly opening yourself up to a lot of emotional risks. And of course, there's the potential physical risks of STDs and whatnot. But if you're saying there's a growing perception among women, maybe, but I don't think it's fair for you to say this is a growing trend unless we're going to just say it's a growing trend in perception.
Well, so I can't.
If you're saying it's a growing thing or a growing trend, why then has women's sexual encounters not risen from 2000 to 2017?
So I'd have to confirm the validity of that study and what you're talking about. Because
hypothetically, if it was right, though, what would you say?
Well, hypothetically, if it was right, then it would show me that women are lying somewhere, because when there's tens upon tens upon tens upon tens upon tens of them that say otherwise that we hear. So where are those women? They're not in that study, I guess. What's going on? People also live like I love these studies that look at, hey, there's 500 people here, and you're like, but I exist in the world, and I went out, and saw 300 women in front of me at a club the other night, and this is what I saw. And there's like things that you observe sometimes, you see with your own two eyes, and you're like, that is not what's happening. I mean, I don't think it's like talking about the moral degradation of society. We can sit here and say that there was a study that showed that people still have strong morals, and they went into a room and they all said, I have strong morals, and they wrote it on a piece of paper. And then you look around at like rap music and people twerking on stage and, abortion being treated like birth control. And that's just not a reality of what's happening in terms of human behavior. So I don't know what the study says, but I can tell you that I showcase woman after woman after woman that wears their high body count like a badge of honor. And that is a bad thing. I don't care.
Just to be clear, just like I was saying, please don't extrapolate from anecdotes onto general. I'm not saying that the data speaks for everybody.
But that's what these guys are saying that you're railing against. What the sneakos and what they're saying is that's not a good look for women. It's just not a good look. We don't want to take women seriously who behave that way. That's all they're saying is like, if you are wearing your body count proudly on your forehead and it's just 75, I'm not bringing you home to mom.
Then that should be the conversation, not this is a growing trend of women becoming promiscuous and it's so scary.
That is the conversation.
So they're having conversations just about specific women who they view as being
No, they're having
promiscuous?
A conversation of like, women are vocalizing, women are coming on these shows, right? On whatever show, Fresh and Fit, and they're saying, this is my life. I can do whatever I want. This is my body count. And well, if I don't care about yours, why are you going to care about mine? There's a double standard. And these guys are just simply saying there's a double standard because you don't care about my body count and I do care about yours. The double standard is called reality. Men are men, women are women. We care about different things. And I'm just telling you straight up, you can continue to do what you want to do. But if you continue to do that, I'm not wifing you up. So either take note of that and change your behavior or be content to not be wifed up by guys like me. I think that's fair.
If that was what they were saying, I'd be fine with it. But I mean,
because
because
I listen to it all the time.
But just a minute ago, you yourself said the promiscuity is growing. It's a growing trend, and that's an empirical claim. So if you say this is something that is growing or this trend is becoming this thing, that is an empirical claim. You need to have some kind of a data set to actually demonstrate that.
What I'm saying is you have an increasing number of women that are showing up and being very loud and very vocal about the fact that this is their behavior. I don't know if they're going to be reflected in whatever study you're citing, but they are on camera. They are saying, this is my behavior, I'm proud of it, and you have to deal with it. And guys are saying, no, honey, I actually don't have to deal with it. I can not wife you up and you can be alone. And I'm just saying, if the goal here is to get more women and more men to find a happy union, shouldn't we just acknowledge the basic realities that men and women care about different things?
I feel like we obviously acknowledge that.
But
I mean,
no,
that's obvious. People know that men and women.
No, but they don't. They don't, or they wouldn't be sitting at a table with Myron and saying, well, I don't care about your body count. Why do you care about mine? All he's saying is, I don't care because as a man, I'm looking for different things in a female than as a female. Like maybe you care about how much money I make a year, but I don't care if you work at Applebee's.
Right. No, that's true. Men are definitely far more visual, but I feel like there's another contradiction in what you said because you're simultaneously saying that maybe these studies indicating that there hasn't been a growing trend of women having more sexual.
I don't trust your sample pool.
But you're saying maybe they were lying, and you're also saying women are now wearing their high body count as a badge of honor. So why were they lying in the study?
I don't know.
No,
I'm not saying
wearing
maybe they're lying. I'm
their
saying
body
I
count
don't
as a
know.
badge of
I
honor.
don't know anything about these studies. I haven't had the chance to like look and evaluate what the sample size is, what it looks like, how they ask these questions, I don't know anything about these studies, so I can't weigh in on them. You could send them to me and I can cover them. I'd
be happy to send them to you if you
But what I'm saying to you is point blank, and I'm not coming here with this stat and that stat. What I'm saying to you is I see a growing pride in women for bad behavior. I see a growing number of women who are told and have absorbed that this is good behavior. And then I see those same women in 10 years as a result of that behavior alone and unhappy. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to address why and trying to open women's eyes and say, this is why. Either do something about it or don't, but this is why. Sure. So I can't tell you, again, I can't comment on, you're citing a percentage of a certain sample size. What I can tell you is that I have eyes and ears and I'm alive in the world. And I go to parties and I go to events and I see what's happened in terms of clothing women wear. And I've seen what's happened in terms of I don't need a man. And I've seen what's happened in terms of feminism. And I just look around and I'm like, wow, if you went like this and snapped your fingers and flashed and it was 1995, you would not be looking at what you're looking at right now. Women would not be behaving like that. They just didn't behave that way. It's like a joke. So I'm just observing life, and that what I'm seeing and feeling doesn't line up. But that's not to say I'm not calling you inaccurate or whatever. I would love to see the information. But it's just not going to look for women. So that's all I'm saying. I'm talking about what these guys are saying and what you have.
Honestly, and I mean, I've even argued myself also that, because I believe another statistic that'll probably help the red pill people out is that people who have had prior sexual partners have a higher risk of divorce. This isn't borne out in every study, but most available research does suggest that if you have prior body count, that is raising the likelihood of divorce.
That's right. I've seen those studies, and I've also seen studies that say the opposite. And that's the thing about, like you just acknowledged, right? So you and I would agree that that's I would tend to agree that a study like that I've seen manifest in life. Yes. But you're going to find studies that say that's not true either. So that's when I look at these studies, and the last 2 years have made me very attentive to that because of a lot of what came out of the pharma machine. So I became a data analyst, which I did not anticipate. I don't know if we can talk about that on YouTube, but we'll do what we can. But I want to shift. Delia, do we have super chats already?
Yeah, we actually have a lot of them.
Okay, so we're going to do super chats. Then I'm going to get to toxic masculinity. And if we have a lot, guys, I'm going to have to raise it to $10 and up. I apologize for that. I don't often do that, but we have a lot I want to cover here. So let's hit some of those.
All right. The first one is question for Hunter. Alvin says, Hunter, we never argued that women in general are promiscuous. We argued that promiscuous women do not make good wives. And Farhad said, hey, guys, do you think non-consensual condom removal can be sexual assault? And
that's a weird question.
Yeah. That's
Jelly's like,
thing, right?
Why did I read that one? No, thank you for the question.
How long has Hunter been married?
I've been married now we just had our 3-year anniversary, but we dated for a couple of years before that. And we were friends, actually, as growing up. So it was kind
nice.
of
Congratulations.
Nice love story.
Yeah, there you go.
Yoya says, do you guys think women say they don't care about men's body count because they want men to not care? A lot of virgins want also a man with the same values because they come from religious communities.
So my opinion is that women say they don't care because they don't care about your past. I think is this a Myron quote I'm pulling, but I happen to agree with it. But they don't care about their past; they care about your. I think women want a loyal, faithful man to them. I do believe that. I don't think there's a lot of women that are going to sign up for the I share you. That's where I disagree with some in the red pill community.
The open marriage stuff.
Yeah, I just don't think most women are going to sign up for that. Not to say none, and do what you want. It's your relationship, not mine. But I think women oftentimes feel like, as long as you're loyal and faithful to me, like the past is the past, and we're more able to accept that from a man than a man is willing to accept that from a woman. That's my assessment. I don't know if you feel differently, Hunter, but.
Yes, and John says we need more conversations like this, issue-based and respectful, even if things get heated at times. No character smearing, more flexing, or anything like that, often seen on social media. Wally Wall says, I 100% care about body count. However, I won't negatively shame a woman for a high body count. I categorize her as a plaything, kind of like a porn star. It's hard because they both lie about it.
The lying is an interesting component.
Yeah, it's actually that's another one that I'd like to. I looked at a couple numbers on, and it's interesting because men and women will both lie, and then they will raise the body count or lower the body count sometimes, depending on the context that they're in. That's not to say everything is fudged or whatever, but it is interesting.
I've seen women come tell me that and men, that even when they're surveyed, I mean, this happens all the time in politics too. People leave a voting booth and they lie. They lie because they don't necessarily want public what was a private decision. So it would not surprise me if there was a lot of deception that happens in studies on what's very intimate behavior.
I would agree. Oh, sorry. I'm not going to take too long, but I would agree with you generally speaking that, yeah, that's obviously a potential. But I think that's also why it's valuable to look at multiple different data sets, not just one.
But also, like, look at life. Like, we have to, I know it's a study, but, like, just I always tell people, like,
but that can be your reality. But the reason I find studies to be valuable is because that speaks for.
I'm not saying no.
That speaks for a broader group.
I'm not saying no, but again, my argument is not about that. My argument is not about all women are promiscuous, and this is my argument is like, why are you now feeling this is good for you? Why is there an increasing number of women who vocalize that? Why are you vocalizing it, and why are you not putting two and two together that if your ultimate reality is not to be alone, that this may be compromising your ability to find that partner that you ultimately want. So that's where me personally, where I'm headed. But Deli, you got more?
Yeah, question. Another one from Steven. Is Hunter's position that OnlyFans isn't a current rising trend?
Hunter's position that OnlyFans, well, OnlyFans would not fall into actual sexual encounters if we're talking about physical sexual encounters. So yes, OnlyFans is obviously a rising trend. That doesn't translate to women necessarily sleeping with more people.
So, and that's an interesting component of the conversation too, because when you talk about promiscuous, what does that mean to different people? To one person, that does mean a physical engagement. To somebody else, that could mean an online engagement. That's,
to me, I really don't. Well, the OnlyFans thing, I think I probably wouldn't be a fan of, just personally. Like,
well, yeah, think about that though. If a guy, if you're talking about body count, right? That's bodies, right? Physical bodies. But if you talk about, OnlyFans girls, guys aren't going to want to wife somebody up. That's going to be a problem too, and that's not a physical encounter. So, do
you think that ever gets taken too far though? So I actually remember one of the clips you went over of my response to Sneeko. He was talking about, he said specifically that she's wasting her youth on Instagram, and I said it seems like he's taking issues with the girl's posting like some skimpy bikini pictures, and then I think that you were more thinking what he was getting at was like OnlyFans type shit, but. He said wasting your youth away on Instagram as if a woman posting like some skimpy pics is this big problem.
So I think there's a difference. That's a good question. I think there's a difference between a woman who has an Instagram, is young, is single, and posts, a little selfie here and there. Maybe they go to the beach, they're in the bikini, I think there's a fine line between that and then hypersexualized women who devote an entire Instagram page to, trying to attract thirsty men. I think that there's a fine line. I think some of these women go crazy where they're like borderline half naked, where it's highly, near
how is this not
nudity.
Breaking TOS, right?
Right, but I do think that's different. So I think I don't know what he was saying. I don't want to speak for him in that clip, but I think that a young woman who is putting it all out there consistently, and there's clearly hypersexualized content for a reason and is looking for that type of attention and that type of energy would be a red flag for me as a man. Sure. 100%. Whereas somebody who's just living their life, happens to be an attractive woman, goes to the beach one day, takes a bikini shot, then maybe there's 10 pictures after that, then maybe over here there's a sexy selfie. Those are two different realities, and it's going to be up to guys to make that judgment call. I did a video recently about red flags and I gave some tips. Yeah. So.
Well, I think it's good also that we kind of, because you're right, that the definitions of promiscuous, what exactly does that mean? I think that's a good thing that we kind of briefly mentioned.
Yeah, and
because
I started the conversation about body count, and to me, promiscuity does cross a line of where it's not just a body. Like, I think of OnlyFans, to me, that would be a huge red flag for me. In fact, if somebody had a body count, you could say somebody had a body count of 5 versus somebody who had a body count of 1 but had a whole OnlyFans career. That would arguably be a much more problematic red flag in a woman, as far as my perception. But
then like 5 partners in a relationship.
Well, yeah, and that's the nuance of this, I think, of this conversation, because even the word promiscuity can be very subjective to people. Yeah. And I don't know when they ask people that, when they talk about it, when they're counted in a survey. That's another.
And to be clear,
thing.
the data sets that I was referencing was specifically measuring sexual encounters, so it was physical relations.
Yeah.
It wasn't
you hear
just
about these women now that are like, by the way, when it comes to bodies, they'll openly say that, you know, they dig back into the ditch. So in other words, if they've been with 5 guys and they still want to be promiscuous, instead of adding more guys because it'll up the number, they'll just go back and be like, oh, I'll just have casual sex with these 5 I did already, so I don't add to my body count. I mean, so like, you know what, this is where we're at as
so
a
it's
society.
like I have 5 previous partners, but we've had sex like 200 times.
And they say it. Whole panels of women will say it. So my problem, like, this is why as a female, I'm like, what has gone wrong here? That you, like, this is not good. How about you just don't have promiscuous sex? How about you don't, why do you need to have casual sex with anybody? Like, why don't you just focus on what's ultimately going to make you happy at the end of the day? You already said you want a family ultimately. What are you doing with all this? You know, that's my goal. Okay, Deli. A couple more, then I got to get to toxic masculinity because we're already off the rails here.
Okay, we have one from Mr. Rampart. There is a male mating strategy for men to convince other men not to be choosy with female selection. This is because these men cannot attract women like higher status men can.
That's why I'm married. Yeah, that makes total sense.
I think we have one more. Yeah. I think Jed argues that examples of bad message are getting louder, while Hunter argues that general women are not listening to the public message.
I could say that, yeah. But I mean, again, if we're going to measure promiscuity by OnlyFans and more,
I still disagree with you.
Then I would agree that that's obviously increasing.
Yeah, I still take issue with I want to see the studies, but I take issue with that point as well. I do think that there is a growing trend of women engaging in, and again, what does promiscuity mean? Does it mean more than how many partners? Like, what are we even talking about with that? But I do think there is a growing trend of that, and it's bad. But Deli, I'm going to look at audience 10 and up, just because I have a whole list here that I'm not going to get to, and then I'm going to be real mad, and then I'll start to get cranky.
Then I'm going to get mad too.
Then Hunter's going to get mad. Darts are going to be thrown. It's not going to be good.
I'll show toxic masculinity. Okay.
Toxic masculinity. Do you think it's real?
What do you think toxic masculinity is?
I think it's fake.
Well, no, I mean, what do you think whether you agree with it or not, what do you think it's getting at?
So I don't think it's getting at anything. I think toxic masculinity is a talking point created by the modern feminist movement and the hard left to make men feel bad about their masculinity, about their testosterone. I think underlying it is a goal to not acknowledge that men and women are different, and to undermine what makes men feel good, which is that to be physically fit, to be able to protect themselves and their families, and to be able to, be a warrior for the cause if need be.
Sure. And again, I'll kind of, hopefully we can find some middle ground here for sure. There are so many idiots on Twitter who abuse the term toxic masculinity that I do not fault you at all for having that perception of what toxic masculinity is getting at. I've seen so many like blue-haired, crazy lefty types who are just reeing that,
Stop talking about Destiny. He's not here.
It's toxic.
Just kidding, Destiny. You know I love you.
Like, it's oh shit, I forgot where I was going with that.
No, so many people distorting toxic masculinity.
Yes. Thank you. You threw me off at the Destiny show. Sorry.
Had to say, you blue hair. I mean, come on.
True. But yeah, a lot of the times it is. It's, here's a guy who's doing something, he's strong or being a little bit aggressive or dominant if he needs to be. And, it's toxic masculinity. And it does literally come across as if they are out to just shit on men for being masculine. And I do think that there's a problem there. However, when I myself talk about toxic masculinity, I'm referring to something very specific, and it's something that, again, we're probably going to get into some studies, but has been heavily empirically demonstrated to not only negatively impact men, but impact their relationship and their abilities to navigate relationships and marriages.
What is that? What does that behavior look like?
Yeah, so toxic masculinity, just a quick summary, and I'll get to that, is a set of social expectations of how we think masculinity should be. That is not just toxic to people around the man, but it's actually toxic to the man. It hurts men specifically. So when I talk about this issue, my goal is not to shit on men. My goal is to actually point out a big problem that's hurting men, because right now I think that a lot of men are struggling. And so toxic masculinity is usually this idea of the big one is emotional suppression. That's the big one. You're a man, so you got to be stoic. You got to be, don't show your emotions. Crying is weak. Don't ever be vulnerable. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a time and a place to be aggressive. There's a time and a place to suck it up. I agree with that. I'm not saying men should be out bawling about everything. Neither should women, though. Nobody should be like wailing their ass off about everything. But I do think that there are plenty of men, and it's been demonstrated as well, who are shamed for being vulnerable or for expressing emotions because it's seen as being unmanly. And that kind of a mentality is just so detrimental. I mean, if we want to talk about how suppressing emotions has been contributed to suicidal ideation, committing suicide, even outside of men in general, just suppressing emotions for people has been shown to increase risk of suicide.
We're not going to disagree on that. Just in the sense that, you know, I come from like, my baby is wellness. That's really my main topic that I love. And, you know, there's been a lot of studies on crying and how release is really important in terms of how it affects anxiety, depression, and also how it affects not only your mental health, but your physical health, your body. It's actually like a portal of release. We actually had a doctor on here, Dr. Gonzalez, who talked about emotional release therapy and why if you have buried trauma, it's really important to get that out because it can be a cause of disease. So I'm not somebody that's going to sit here and say, men shouldn't cry. That's just not my MO. What I am somebody who's going to sit here and say that I do value that men are able to, you know, I don't want to see a guy with the level of fragility that I have. And what that means is that when a storm hits my house, I'm going to be the one who has the nervous breakdown. I'm going to throw myself on the floor. I'm telling you straight up, that is going to be me. And I'm really happy that I have a guy there who is more of a rock for me and is going to say, let me figure out how to get us out of this. And there's not that same focus on panic for him because he's already analyzing what to do and what to get out. That doesn't mean that there's a death in the family or something happens that he doesn't have emotions and he doesn't show them. But again, I think there is a big difference between the way men and women manifest emotion and what's healthy for a woman and what's healthy for a man. And I feel like there's this blanket approach sometimes of like, oh, in the same way that you're saying there's a suppression of emotion for men, there's also this call in society for always at men like, oh, don't you need to cry? Don't you feel that? Don't you? And sometimes guys are just like, no.
Yeah,
like,
sometimes
I don't,
they're like, can you stop?
I don't have that. That's not me. You know, that's not my experience. And some of that, I firmly believe, is related to hormones and related to biology.
Right. Well, actually, it's, sorry to cut you off, but what you said about your husband a minute ago, not panicking and freaking out, I think that's just a healthy relationship. Ideally, your partner would be somebody that when you're feeling vulnerable, they're kind of a rock to you, and vice versa.
Yeah, but think about it like this. I mean, let's be honest now. That's true. Use the partner word. Audience hates that. Just I can't. The chat's going to be blowing up.
Sorry, I didn't know that was.
You didn't get the memo.
I didn't mean to trigger anybody.
But think
I'm sorry.
About this. If you have if you have a house where when a storm hits, say you have a man and a woman married, and when a storm hits, there's a 50-50 chance of who's going to crack. That house isn't going to work. It's not, because women by nature really need to feel that guy is a rock, and they will get very nervous and very uncomfortable if they don't have that security in a man. That's not to say that he's supposed to be stoicism. To me, sometimes I don't really understand what that means. You can never cry, you can never have that just doesn't seem healthy to me.
Yeah.
But I think that a healthy household is one where the man in that house, the man of that house, has a certain sturdiness to him that.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. Having a backbone is a very important quality.
Yeah. So we agree on that in terms of, I think that is a component of the toxic masculinity debate that is
so
more
then you
nuanced.
Agree that there is some level of toxic masculinity?
No, I don't think that's toxic masculinity, actually. I think that's not about masculinity. That's just toxic.
Wait, but
like,
the
in other words,
notion that men specifically shouldn't cry or suppress emotions.
Well, that's not toxic masculinity, though. That's just absurd. That's an absurd. What does that have to do with?
Because that's an expectation that's specifically placed on masculinity that's toxic to the man. So there was a study done by Men's Mental Health that looked at 4,000 different men in the U.S., Canada, the UK, Australia, and they found some 58% of those men said that, yes, they recognize that expressing emotion is important, but they still feel like they're shamed and punished if they do so. And I think there was some 20% of that sample said that they're mocked for not being manly if they show emotion.
They'll mock by who? What is that?
Probably their other friends, maybe people around them.
So again, like I don't know what that looks like in terms of, is this a guy who's crying all the time? Is this a guy who's extremely weak? Is this a guy who doesn't have any backbone whatsoever? I mean, I'm certainly not for a nation of male babies that have safe spaces. That's a deeply disturbing reality that would happen. It is happening, frankly. But I don't. That has no relationship to the phrase toxic masculinity to me. What I would say about that,
everything to do.
No,
with
what I would say
masculinity.
about that is that men are human beings, and by virtue of that, they will go through ups and downs in life, And my expectation is that because of the way men are wired, male strength is an incredibly powerful thing. And I would hope that you would be able to manifest that strength when the woman in your life needs it and be a rock for her. But that doesn't prevent you from having a natural emotion or a natural response when something happens. But it shouldn't be, we shouldn't be so utterly fragile.
Well,
like
I agree,
men,
but I
men
don't
are
think,
increasingly very fragile.
I don't think it needs to be one extreme to the other. I don't think it needs to be either men are sobbing every time their cell phone dies, or men are like these big, tough, masculine guys. I think that we can honestly find a middle ground. Having a backbone is important. Being confident is incredibly important. I would say even being dominant at times is important. But it's just denying reality, honestly, if you're going to claim that the expectation that men shouldn't cry isn't a form of toxic masculinity.
Well, it's just that's not like when people talk about toxic masculinity, oftentimes they're talking about what makes men perpetrators in some way negatively on society. They're talking about like your masculinity is aggressive, you're dominant, you're mansplaining, that's the angle I'm
mansplaining
coming.
thing is so
That's what
cringe.
I'm coming at it from. So I don't, to me, under the umbrella of toxic masculinity of what I discussed, that is a completely unrelated topic. Now, that's not to say you and I can't find common ground in that area, but that's not what I see. When I see feminists and shouting about toxic masculinity, they're not talking about, worried about men's emotions. In fact, the Drew Affollows of the world are very, I don't know if you know who she is, but the feminists will come out and say, well, I don't care about these guys at all, actually. I don't care about these men.
Yeah, there are genuinely, there are
I'm not saying
100%
that.
there are feminists who
Yeah.
actually adamantly hate men.
But I think the stoicism is the reason that that's held in high esteem societally, I think, and I think a good example is if you look at what happened in the last couple of years with the fear that took over society at large. We can maybe differ about some components of what happened during the pandemic. But pandemic, scamdemic, call it what you want. But we can differ about what happened there. But what I think what must be acknowledged is that fear overtook many people. And what I saw is that fear overtook what looked like very healthy, very strong, very capable men and turned them into small children. That is a societal problem. So the reaction to that, I think, is a lot of these guys saying, you've got to be that rock. You've got to, and maybe some of them push it too far and expect that man to not have emotions.
Yeah.
But there
Well,
is
it's
a
actually
need for
like-
that buildup.
I agree. And it's actually almost paradoxical because a lot of the times, since men are socialized to show less emotion, that actually contributes to them sometimes melting down more quickly because there isn't that emotional intelligence and that emotional strength. And so they're dealing with these maybe feelings of fear or whatnot. And rather than knowing how to process that and maybe communicate that and then work through it and becoming a stronger guy, they just crack under the pressure. And so I think in a lot of ways, the suppressing emotion conversation, I'm not saying that you're saying that men should suppress emotion. We obviously agree on that.
I'm not.
Which is
And I
good.
do believe that could correlate with something like suicide, that ultimately, depending upon the man, depending upon what kind of trauma he's been through in life, some people are crying, people come from broken homes. I mean, there's trauma that people experience.
It actually contributes heavily to divorce also. So, obviously we hear about how 70% of divorces are initiated by women. And a large reason for this is that women go into marriages expecting more emotional intimacy from their partner than they actually get. And so because men oftentimes don't really know how to properly express their emotions, like they don't have emotional intelligence, that actually is a massive letdown for the woman and oftentimes is the motivator behind why she might want to divorce and move on because her expectations haven't been met.
And I don't know how much of a motivator that is. There's a number of factors that come into why women leave. And some of it I think has to do with truly the embrace of feminism in terms of the workforce and what that does to a household. I'm not telling women not to work, do what you want, but the dynamic that has created in some households has been problematic. I think a lot of times the studies also show that when women make more money than men, that becomes a problem in the dynamic in the relationship.
Well, you're right that it did show that, but that gap has significantly decreased, I think, in the early 2000s. And even when it was still there, it was because men would feel insecure about the fact that their women their wives, whatnot, were making more money than them. And I think that too is like, that's what I mean, is this idea that because you're a man, you need to be the dominant breadwinner at all times. I think that the best approach is what works best for the individual family unit.
Okay, but that doesn't, I'm going to tell you that doesn't work for women by and large. They don't like it. They don't like it. Women don't like to be in a relationship where, I'm not saying every case, by the way, I'm not saying every case, but oftentimes when you wind up in a situation where a guy is earning less money, the woman becomes uncomfortable in that dynamic, because women in many cases want the option to work, but they don't want to have to work. They want that flexibility. And again, men and women are different, and women do want to be able to lean on that guy. And there is a power dynamic shift that happens when it comes to money that, yes, the man feels, right? Because in his mind and in his body and in his testosterone, he's saying, I should be the man of this house. I should be taking care of X, Y, and Z, and now I'm not. I
disagree with this. I don't think this is a biological thing. I think that men...
You don't think that testosterone drives men to achievement in a way that women don't feel when it comes to career and otherwise?
I think that testosterone can be a component there, but the idea that men, because they're men, need to be the main breadwinner, I disagree with that. I think that that's largely a social thing. We tell men that you're a guy, you need to be the one going to work and making the money, when, again, there's been studies done back in the 1970s that found that when men are actually involved in the household chores, that stabilizes marriage. It benefits marriage. When they're in an equal partnership where both of them are equally respected and they both have a valid influence on the other partner, that benefits relationships.
You can be in a situation of mutual respect, though, where you're not equally sharing household chores. I mean, that's just...
Well, yeah, again, equal... Well, yeah, I'm giving you a definition.
You can be in a situation of
there,
mutual respect and where a guy works and a woman stays home and is a housewife.
But why couldn't it be the other way around?
Well, you tell me. I mean, they should, the women who don't like that dynamic and the marriages that end as a result of it should tell me. I can't speak to that. What I can say is that women very oftentimes get into an uncomfortable dynamic when they are head of household. They don't want to be head of household.
But being the breadwinner doesn't necessarily mean you're the head of household. And I don't think that it should be one head of household. I think if you're a couple, if you're married, especially with children, you should be a unit. You should be in agreement. You should be working together.
There has to be a head of household, though.
Why?
There has to be, because ultimately, when you sit down at a table and you're making a decision, somebody has to green light that, right? So somebody, at the end of the day, you say you're going back and forth, you're going back and forth, you're going back and forth. There has to be a green light at the end of the day. Who's that going to be?
Well, it's going to depend on the decision being made. So there's sometimes where...
You sound like me in my first... Audience, does he not sound like me in my first interview with Rollo? I'm just saying. No, because I've gone through a little bit of a process here where I had to sit back and kind of think about this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying there should ever be a situation of disrespect, but in a household where a woman makes more money, is in a position of authority, is in a more dominant role, you're going to have a problem in that household. You are. That woman is going to be very distracted away from that man by a guy over here who is expressing a more dominant masculine energy.
So when you say that men, or when you talk about the head of household thing, just to go back to that really quick, I think that this should, again, like what I just said, be dependent on the decision being made. So there's plenty of times where me and my wife might disagree on things, and then I kind of, explain my position and explain why, and then she gives hers, and then sometimes I'm like, you know what, that's a good point. I think that's a good idea. Let's go for it.
That's fine.
So, but that doesn't make her the head of household because she greenlit that decision,
no,
right?
It doesn't, but if there's...
We're working as a team. That's the goal there.
But what is the energy in the house? Who has the dominant energy in the house? You can't have one person. There is a dominant energy in every house. Somebody has it.
I don't know what dominant energy is. That sounds like some hippie
Okay,
stuff.
let's put it into the bed. Is there a dominant energy in a bedroom? Does one person have a more dominant energy in a bedroom? A man or one? I'm not saying... I'm saying in every bedroom.
Of this is the thing is, again, is that if you want to have those types of dynamics, it's fine. But it's the expectation that it should be that way that oftentimes results in the harm.
Here's what I'm saying, though. Is there a dominant energy... I'm not telling you men or woman. I'm saying in every household, in every bedroom, and it may look different, bedroom to bedroom, house to house. Is there a dominant energy, a more authoritative energy in those scenarios? I would say yes.
It would.
Somebody has to be more.
It would wholly depend on the household. I mean, there's some households where you're going to have the man who is like the ultimate authority. And when you're talking about the bedroom stuff, Usually when it's been demonstrated that when women are expected to be submissive in that role, they have less than satisfying sexual experiences.
Women are not expected to be submissive.
They
Women
are.
become submissive because it's appealing to them because they like a man to act like a man.
If they like that, then they don't report negative sexual satisfaction.
You cannot tell me that your statistics show that women want to run the bedroom. I mean,
That's not what I said. What I said is the idea that because they're a woman, they must be the total submissive one.
But you're
here.
caught up.
That is leading to less than ideal sexual experiences.
So you're caught up in, and I see this as a trend, always societal expectations. And what I'm talking about is that men and women are different by nature of their biology and their hormonal makeup.
This
and
is
as
the
a
lazy.
result,
This is lazy.
it's not lazy.
This
It's
is lazy.
It's science.
No, it's not.
It is, though.
This is the lazy
It
way
is.
out.
You can show. You want to talk about studies? You can show studies of babies, newborns, male and female newborns that respond to stimuli differently.
Yeah.
You can show studies of
And male babies are
very
more emotionally
young-
responsive, by the way.
There was something about a study I saw recently about how newborn female babies respond more to faces and male babies responded more to mobiles or something to that
They
effect.
tend to like using their hands, stuff like that.
It's very different.
Objects.
Even the sex hormones that before they're even born, the sex hormones that comprise the makeup of the womb when it's a male womb versus when it's when there's a male inside the womb versus a female are different. So these things absolutely affect the brain chemistry of individuals.
I agree with this, but the reason I'm saying it's a lazy way out is to say, like a minute ago, you said like women don't like when they make more than the man.
I'm saying divorce happens in cases more often when women earn more.
That gap has closed, though. I already said that.
Reason for that, though.
Because this is why it's the lazy way out. Is you're saying, oh well, it's probably just their biology that they prefer the man to be the breadwinner.
I'm not saying it's probably just their biology. I'm saying their biology and their hormones and the differences between men and women that are factually based, grounded in science, plays a role in that. I'm not saying society plays no role, by the way.
Yeah,
but I'm not saying society plays the exclusive role. So in other words, society impacts us.
Hold on, wait.
Go ahead.
The reason I'm saying it sounds like a lazy way out is, yes, there is a large societal component. If you are raised in an environment where you are taught that a good masculine man is the one who's providing, and then you end up being the one being the main breadwinner, that might make you uncomfortable. That's not because of the biology or her hormones or anything. It's because of the expectation that she has been socialized into.
That's silly.
It is not silly.
Now, by the way, and I will agree with you. I will agree with you that there is a social component to behavior.
I have to ask you a follow-up question. So it already has shown that yes, there was a time where if the woman made more, particularly in the 1980s, that would raise the likelihood of divorce, usually because men felt insecure. That gap has now closed. That no longer is a risk. So if it was a biological factor, you would not see that gap close. Instead, society has been more accepting of women being top earners. And if the man is better at stay-at-home dad, he can be the stay-at-home one. And we're not seeing an increase in divorce.
What you're saying, this is the underlying.
Your biological claim.
It's not a purely biological claim. I'm not saying that biology dictates everything. What I'm saying is that there are components of biology, components of just anatomy, like science, genes, chromosomes, hormones that play a role, and society impacts that as well. People are products of the society that they are raised in and grow up in, all of that. I think that both of those things come into play, and we can actually usher this right into our gender activism.
But this is why I feel like it's the lazy way, is because.
But why is that lazy to say that these two things coexist and have an impact? But it is.
Everybody's behavior is a mixture of their socialization and their biology. That's how humans are.
Right.
We are all a result.
But you have
of
a whole.
But
no. Hold on a second, though. We have a whole society of people in 2023 that don't acknowledge that biology exists. So we can't just assume.
Before we move on to that, the thing is, the problem, the reason this is lazy is because it's easier to be like, women prefer the man to be the breadwinner. It's probably or mostly biological. If that gap has closed, then somewhere the biology is no longer calling the shots.
So I would ask
Clearly,
you,
there's a social element here.
I would ask you, we would have to go and ask those people, what do those households look like? Are they happy? Are they in a functional, healthy relationship? What does that look like? If they're not
risk of divorce has gone down, then probably is
fine. That doesn't necessarily translate to that. I don't know. All I can say to you is that there is a like when we talk about, and I think the red pill community has certain interpretations of the word submissive. That's, some find controversial, whatever it may be. But if you're talking about a dynamic of men and women, I think that there is a discomfort. Why do women consistently say they want a gentleman? What does that mean to be a gentleman? It means that there's a certain authority about you. You're opening doors. You're making sure she gets home okay. You are exhibiting a form of dominance in that relationship. Why do they consistently say that they want a guy that makes more than $100,000 a year? Because it's important to them that that guy be a financially stable rock to lean on. You don't see guys saying that about women. Why? Because they're not looking to lean on a woman in the same way that a woman is looking to lean on a man. That structure is absolutely present in society, not because society tells you, but because women are biologically inclined to be thinking about, first of all, our hormonal cycle does not enable us to be 9 to 5 crazy go-getters in the same capacity as men. It doesn't. Even when it comes to exercise, that's a reality. And secondly, our biology is ticking time, like a ticking time bomb toward, do I want a family? Do I want to have a baby, pregnancy, ups and downs of a menstrual cycle? All of that comes into play. And they know, because that biology is hooked into reality, they know that they want that flexibility to be able to stay at home and to be able to have that rock to lean on. Men don't have to think about any of that stuff. So that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is biology plays a role in what you prioritize and where your thought process goes, well beyond what society can tell you. In the same way that society can sit down and tell you that, men shouldn't care about body count because equality or something, it doesn't change the reality that men do care about body count, because that's coming from a hard wire within. Some of this stuff is intrinsic, not all, but some. There has to be a component of it that we acknowledge as intrinsic.
I mean, again, like I've said, obviously there is a degree of biology interacting with the society around you. But even when you say like women are just not as good at the 9 to 5 go-getters.
I didn't say not as good. I said not hardwired hormonally in the same way for a consistent 9 to 5 grind. And the reason for that.
But then why do women thrive in these circumstances? Why are women benefiting?
Are they thriving? Women are horribly unhappy. Horribly unhappy.
Wait, hold on. Everybody is unhappy right now.
Women are more unhappy now than they were 30 years ago.
Happiness rates in general are decreasing.
Here's what I'm talking to you about.
Yes, decreasing.
Testosterone looks like this. Testosterone, if you look at, I wish I had my hormonal thing. I'm really into hormones because I had irregular hormones for a while, so it led me to a lot of research. Testosterone is flat. It's steady, right? Mm-hmm. Which is why personal trainers, when they train women versus men sometimes, will look at guys and they can do a more of a consistent workout schedule. Women are like all like this, because we have all of these different phases of a hormonal cycle. Mm-hmm. They'll even structure workouts where they'll say women can't go hardcore in this phase. I don't remember, it's the luteal, or I don't know the details of that. But in this phase, they're more likely to need more rest. Like, everything is designed around
translate. But
it
no,
absolutely
that doesn't
translates to
that
the
doesn't
work
translate
cycle.
to them not being, or you said they're not. You said you didn't say they're not as good.
No, they're very good. They're very good. I'm not saying they're not good. I'm saying I've done studies also where I showcase that women are fantastic multitaskers, and when you put a bunch of tasks in front of women, they're more likely to be able to complete a number of tasks at once. I think it was. I have to pull that study again, but we basically showed that women are an asset in the workplace in these regards.
Yeah.
However, we're not wired for it in the same way because of biology, and that is why you have women constantly trying to, I call it like feminized workplaces, like Bagel Friday, and we need a break for this, and let's have it more team building, and they do this.
But that's been a thing for a while, right? Like bagels on the workplace.
We
that just
do
sounds
this
like
to
normal.
Spaces because we need it. Because biologically, our body is telling us, give us more work-life balance.
I have a lot of issues with what you're saying right now. I am not denying that there is a biological component. I'm not denying that women have hormonal fluctuations that differ from men. I'm not denying any of that. We would need to look at how that translates to their behavior in the workforce. You'd have to look at, is it actually causing problems? Is it actually not causing problems? You would have to look at that. You can't just say women are hardwired this way. Well, hold on, one more thing. And even more so, even if someone's hardwired to be a certain way, I don't know if that's necessarily, if that means that that's exactly the way that they should live. A lot of the times, if we're going to appeal to nature, the way that we just kind of are, doesn't always translate to, well, then you should behave that way.
Oh, female cannot compete with male testosterone. Male testosterone is a driver toward action. It is, first of all, it's what makes men healthy, right? Testosterone is so important to, it's been demonized, right? I think it was, who was it, James Cameron, that said like testosterone is toxic recently. We covered that. But that's another garbage thing. But testosterone is key for you, for how your anatomy thrives, your
So you think I have
organs, your
testosterone
bones.
then?
Well,
Yes.
I would hope so.
Take that, red pillars.
Who knows in 2023? Maybe you identify as a cat. Who knows? But, testosterone is vital for you. But testosterone is incredibly powerful. It's a driver of ambition. It's a driver in a way that female hormonal makeup is not. That is why men go into these work environments, and you don't need a study to show this. You just need eyes and ears. They will go in, they will be hardwired to work 15, 16, 17-hour days. There is a drive there that comes from biology.
56% of women right now reported in the latest Gallup poll. They have said that they want to go into the workforce.
Of course.
Not that they have to.
Of course.
They want to.
Of course.
So is that not an ambition?
There is your societal impact.
Does that not sound like they have ambition then to work?
It sounds like women have been told for a very long time that they have to compete with a man, that they're working overtime to try to make up for the fact that their hormonal makeup is not driven toward that they much more are suited for a work-life balance, and that they are much happier in those spaces, which is why you have every single, I'm just going to make a statement about my own life. Every single corporate CEO I know that is female is unhappy. Why is that? Why is that? And every single one of those people will tell you, if you have a heart-to-heart with them and they really open up, will sit down and come from media business where all of these women are suffering inside deeply because they are not wired the same way for it, and they are trying to do what society tells them to. I'm not telling women not to work, by the way.
I know. No, I understand.
And I'm not telling women, listen, I have a show here. I have a career that came before this. I'm not telling them not to do that. But because I've been in the thick of that, I can tell you that you should honor your biology. And if your body is telling you this is overwhelming, how many of those women come home and can't find the work-life balance and are absolutely miserable? How many women do we know on antidepressants right now? How many women
men?
are on anxiety? For different reasons.
How many people in general are unhappy if they don't have a good work-life balance?
Reasons.
This is...
Men do not crave a work-life balance the way women do. They don't, because they're driven by, you cannot ignore the impact of these hormones.
If that was true, then why do women not only do well in a work environment, but they significantly benefit work environments?
Because, that's not to say they're not capable.
But you're saying they're not following their biology? They're not hardwired for that, apparently. So how are they benefiting the company?
I'm saying they're capable, they're smart, they're organized, they're great at interpersonal relationships. I'm not here to rag on women. I am one. I know that what I bring to the table, and I'm proud of the fact that I'm a woman. And I'm not telling these women what to do. What I am telling you is that you cannot compete with male testosterone, and there are a number of women, an increasing number of women, who go into these spaces, feel like they have to compete with men in a corporate structure, climb this corporate ladder. One, they push their whole family life aside for an extended period of time. They delay that. They wind up in a freeze your eggs panic. And because there is a biological clock that women have to think about that men don't. That's a whole societal component. And then they're depressed and miserable and looking back, and like, the career's not going to keep you warm at night in the same way that a husband and a child will. I can tell you that from experience.
That would depend, because
it doesn't.
Well, this is why I like numbers,
it doesn't.
But this is why I feel like you don't like numbers as much as I do, because but the numbers that exist don't help you.
What do the numbers show? Do they show that the women are happy?
They show that stay-at-home moms have higher rates of depression. They show that women who are in caregiving positions.
What did I say? I didn't say anything about stay-at-home mom.
They said that women who are in caregiving positions report more negative emotions. This idea that just because they're women, they would be happier if they had a child and a husband. That's not necessarily true. People are happiest when they're living the lives that they want to live.
That's not what I said. What I said is there are an increasing number of women who climb the corporate ladder, feel that they have to compete with a man, are told they have to compete with a man, follow that path, do want a family and a husband, delay it, and wind up at the end of the road thinking that they spent a lot of time on something that shouldn't have been a priority, and look back at that and say, I was working my fingers to the bone to be what society told me I needed to be, and that didn't bring me joy. That's what I'm saying.
So do you think that there is a middle ground then? Because say that you have a single woman and she does want to get married at some point, she wants to have a kid, but it's also important that she has a means by which she can support herself independently before she's married, right? So, I mean, if she's working, the thing is that I always wonder is, why can't you do both? Like, I feel
because it's hard to do both as a woman, because time passes very quickly and fertility windows are what they are.
I'm sorry, I should clarify. I mean, if you have a husband and you have a child, you can do both. A lot of the times it's seen as this either or. It's like become the
Who takes
family
care of the
person
child?
or
Who takes care of the child?
it would depend, I guess.
So let's say you have two working parents in a house.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what your situation is. I have an oddly flexible situation, obviously. Maybe you do
too.
as well.
I kind of understand
Right.
that, yeah.
So let's say you have two working parents in a house, and the woman wants to stay and do what she has a passion for, her career, whatever it may be. She wants to stay. The husband is going to stay. What happens with that child? If there's not, let's take out that grandma lives next door, because that's not a lot of people's reality. I wish it was my reality. Mom, please move. But it's not a lot of people's. What happens to that child?
I mean, unfortunately, some kids are just kind of put in daycare and they're raised in daycare.
That's why it's
But
a
the problem, well, hold on. If we want to talk about the reality, a lot of the times the reality is that the way the economy is right now, both parents need to work. Sometimes it's seen as like the selfish woman is neglecting the child. What about the families who they're just scraping by and they both need to work? That's also a reality.
Fair. So but what happens to that child? Like this is what, that's fair.
So if they can't support the child with just the income of one parent, then should they not have the child?
No, what I'm saying to you is that's fair. That's a fair assessment that does happen, that you have families where both parents need to work. But what I'm saying is it worth a look? And I'm not, this is not even what I'm saying to do, but why can't we have a conversation about, is that the ideal though? Is the ideal situation that both parents work?
Right.
I would say no.
And I would agree. If they have a kid, yeah, the ideal
Because
situation would be that somebody is with that
needs
child more
to be
often.
with that child, right? And
It could be
and
the
I asked, I don't remember who did talking about like you may have an issue with this, I don't know, but somebody did. Oh God, was it Tate? Who was it that said, if you walked into a nursery and let's say you walked into a daycare center, you have a daughter, okay? If you walked into a daycare center for your 3-year-old and you looked around and there were a bunch of kids there and there were 10 people who worked there to take care of your little girl, and it was 10 men, would that seem odd to you?
Probably, yeah.
Why?
Because right now it's primarily women in those positions.
Would it feel odd to you? Would you prefer if you could walk next door and you could have 10 women take care of your little girl? Would you opt for that?
It would again depend. This is where the socialization aspect comes in.
Okay, but
because
it's
this,
not just
but no, I
socialization,
know where
though.
you're going with this.
No,
because
no,
you're
but
trying to make the argument that women are sort of naturally nurturers and better caregivers.
I'm
by
not
default.
trying to make the argument. I'm making the argument because it's true.
No, it's not.
Women
That's what
are
I'm saying.
naturally more nurturing by nature.
That's not, hold on. Women are not as happy in these positions, primarily when they are expected to be in these positions, when that's not what they want
Forget
to
about
do.
expectation when somebody doesn't want to do it, because that's like saying that somebody has a baby and they never wanted a baby.
But women are expected more so to be the nurturers,
I'm
the
not talking
caregivers.
about expectation, though. I'm talking about biology. So I carried a child in my belly, and that I gave that little boy life, right? So there is a connection I have to him that no one's going to have, including my husband. My husband has his own relationship with my son, but that nurturing chip, that's biology. I'm not saying that a guy can't be. I'm not saying a guy can't be warm and a guy can't
guy
be
can be
affectionate,
nurturing, right?
and a guy can't be. I'm not even saying that a guy can't be nurturing, but I'm saying that is it not just a reality that by nature women are more nurturing? Can we not just acknowledge that? I mean, why is it so hard to just acknowledge that there are certain differences in men and women? Men are stronger.
Yes.
They're stronger. You're more built for a fight, for a physical fight, across the board. I mean, of course, yeah, you pull in a female boxer and she comes at you today, you're going to be
getting
like,
wrecked.
shit.
Yeah.
But maybe not, actually. I don't know.
I'm not a very good metric. I mean, like a chihuahua could beat me up.
Okay.
So,
well, don't say that too proudly. Just say it. But you know what I'm
Soy
saying?
boy
Barring
pride, okay?
that, though, why can't we just acknowledge? I just don't understand how we got to a place where you can't just acknowledge basic differences. And
But I'm not afraid to acknowledge the basic differences.
But you
if you're going
are.
to say women are naturally nurturers, how's that being measured? What do you mean by that exactly?
why
a
does that-
man can be a nurturer also.
you don't. But to say women are more nurturing by nature than men, you don't feel comfortable to make that assessment?
I feel like it intuitively seems correct because that's what you see a lot.
That's
However, I
silly.
think that a
Hunter,
lot of the
that's
times,
silly.
well, no,
That's
I think that a
silly.
lot of the times we assume that, oh, this is just biology. Oh, women are just kind of built for this.
No,
this
we
is
don't
just
assume it exists. It's women give
But
birth to babies. They carry the child in their belly. Our pain receptors are connected. This is just a reality of life, of having a child. It's a different relationship, mom to baby, than dad to baby, because of that, because of what happens. You're feeling you grow this person.
You have a unique connection with that child.
And there's a reason why I'm not here to make a comment about women who are put into caregiver positions against their will. Of course, that's problematic. You don't want those people in those positions. You don't want anybody, frankly, in any job they don't want to be in. They're going to just be a hazard in some way. But women gravitate towards certain things by nature. Like, why? Because there's different priorities. Women when you look at like engineering school, or you look at a teaching degree, that's not all societally induced, like you must. That there are preferences that are male and female, because men and women are different. It's okay to say that.
I completely acknowledge that males and females are
but
different.
You're
they
very
are.
stuck on the societal role, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it doesn't take away from the realities of those differences.
So let's say I concede then, okay, it's biological. Then what? The societal aspect we can change. We can influence to the benefit of women and men if we need to. We can change that aspect. The biology thing, if you're right, it's okay, then it's biology, I guess.
Cool.
Then what?
Then what? Then you acknowledge that there are certain roles that are more conducive to women and certain to men, and they will naturally gravitate toward them, and everyone needs to stop being upset about it.
I think that when you even the example you just brought up, the teachers compared to the engineers, this is a perfect example of the way society does influence this. Women were massive contributors to STEM research. Women arguably they contributed massively to it at the time. And so where they gravitate, the careers they choose to go to, the roles they fall into, that is heavily, not just partially, it is heavily socially influenced. When women
That's like saying people have so what does that mean? A woman goes to school and says, I want to study this. That's not because that's what she really wants to do. That's what society told her that she wants to do. That's ridiculous. Like saying we're all puppets in a machine?
No. I'm saying quite the opposite. I'm saying that according to you, that woman would sit down and naturally gravitate towards wanting to do something more caregiving.
What I'm saying is that individuals, first of all, will naturally gravitate toward different things. We can both acknowledge that. But you can't ignore the reality that if you look at people in an education department in a school, you're going to see more women gravitating toward that. If you look at a science technology division in a company, you're going to see more men. That's not because companies are saying, I'm only going to hire men. That's not because of discrimination. That is because women and men are different, and they are naturally on their own, without society dictating to them. They have completely free opportunity to do whatever they want, making different choices. It's not false.
So, for example, there was a really good little study that was done where they showed that when girls were going through science textbooks, simply having a photo there in the science textbook of a male scientist tended to influence the way that they viewed those careers. So after the fact, virtually everybody in the study said, draw a picture of a scientist. They drew a picture of a man. Why do you think that is? Do you genuinely think that it's just this biological, I'm a man, I must be doing science crap?
I'm saying
that's not the case. If you're
not everyone is
expand.
societally programmed to that level.
Well, no, like, but just if I can further expand here.
You could draw all the pictures in the world from me. Like, I don't care if you put women in I see tons of books out now where women they're pushing it on everyone. This now, diversity hiring and
hold on. There's so much evidence that contradicts what you're saying. So for example, something happened in the 1990s. I don't know if you remember the X-Files.
The show?
Yeah. The X-Files came out, and it was called the Scully effect, where this obviously wasn't the first time a female scientist was ever shown on TV, but the way it was depicted, I think, was unique. And then you saw a massive uptick from there of women going into scientific fields.
Saying, oh, that's cool, I want to do that because I saw it on a TV show? Sure.
If you grow up in an environment where all you primarily see is man doing science and girl being teacher.
That's silly.
No, it's not. That is literally called social conditioning. That's what happens to everybody.
That means to everybody is socially conditioned.
Yes.
Okay, so for everything, biology plays no role in anything.
I have never said that.
That's ridiculous.
No, you're misinterpreting what I said.
So let me ask you a question.
Wait. Because earlier I just said that we are all a result of our biology interacting with society.
Let's say we were born and we're born and we're placed on, I'm trying to make this so that there would be almost no media influence, no books. You're born and you're thrown on a desert island, okay? Men, women, 20 of us, okay? I'm there, you're there. We grow up, we're the same age. You don't feel that on that desert island, women and men would naturally gravitate toward different things. Forget about what they saw in books, there are none. What they see on TV, there is none. What they see, you don't feel that you would see a very clear delineation between male and female behavior. Not 100%, but let's say 90% of the time.
If you're on a desert island needing to survive, then yeah, probably the people with testosterone, since they're stronger, are going to begin hunting, building, and yeah, you're probably going to see some differentiation there.
Interests as well.
But that does not translate to testosterone means do math or do science.
I'm not saying
or do
testosterone
engineering.
means do math or science. What I'm saying is that men and women are gravitating toward different things.
But you need to ask yourself why that is.
There's a movement in this country that refuses to acknowledge biological differences and that biological differences play a role. You're acknowledging that.
This is lazy. To just be like men and women gravitate towards different things, and that's just how
not
it is.
Everything
bruh.
is a social construct. Gender is also not a social construct.
Nothing I said has anything to do with
But that is
social
the
construct.
talking point. That is the talking point.
Hold on.
Everything is a social construct.
That was
now.
a massive pivot, though, because nothing I said has anything to do with social construct.
You're talking about
being lazy
societal
by saying,
impact. It's not lazy.
Because what you're saying is women are going this way, men are going this way, and that's just, that's the reality.
That's not
Their
what
biology.
I'm saying. What I'm saying is women are making these choices.
Why?
Men are making these choices.
Why? Why do they make those choices? Do you think it's predominantly
not all
biology?
Because they are told that's what they're supposed to do. It's just not.
I don't think that they're being sat down and being like, you are a girl, so you will do this. I think that there are subtle ways that we are influenced.
You don't think there's textbooks out now in engineering that showcase women? I mean, that's silly. Maybe 50 years ago.
That's not like the only thing.
So
I'm
what are
talking about
women
here.
messaging? Where are women receiving messaging that science and engineering is not? What does that look like?
They're probably receiving some of that message from your show. You just said that women are gravitating towards this and men are gravitating towards engineering.
Hold on a second. A grown woman, God help her if she exists, is listening to my show. And because I'm saying this, she is so undeniably programmable that she deviates from what she naturally wants and believes is societally appropriate for her to do. That's silly.
This is a straw man. What I'm talking about is when you are born into an environment where...
But tell me specifically where. Tell me how a woman who wants to go into science and engineering, let's say I'm really interested in this. What does she see along the way that society would impose in some way that would deviate her from that and tell her, no, it's time for me to be a school teacher?
Right. So maybe I need to be more clear here. I don't think that there's some like evil society being like, you're a girl, you need to do this. You're a boy, you need to do this. What it is when you are born into general society in this world that we live in, you see things, yes, on TV, you witness people around you, you see the averages, you see that most scientists are depicted as men, or you see that most engineers are depicted as men, and you...
Not anymore. That's not real.
Okay, maybe not anymore, which is probably a good thing.
That's not happening.
And then you begin to internalize that, and that is what motivates,
women are being
to
told
a large extent, those
that
decisions.
is not accurate. Women are being told every single day ad nauseum. Truthfully, you can do anything you want. You can be anything you want.
But not every woman,
you can
and
do
especially
this,
not little
you
girls,
can do
are
that.
watching some
You're in the
politics
military.
thing.
There's separate sets of standards. You could be a fireman, even though that's utterly ridiculous in most cases. You can be. They're being told this all the time.
What
It's
about,
coming
like, the
in and out of their years.
Doctors are shown so frequently being men.
That's
right?
ridiculous.
And so that's
That
going
is
to motivate that kind of a decision
That is not a
making.
reality of the 2023 world. You can say that there was a time where that was a reality. That is not happening today. Women are being inculcated ad nauseum with, you can do anything you want, you can do what a man does, you can do this job, so much so that even to the point where they don't have the qualifications, like, by the way, how I feel women shouldn't be in first line of combat, or women shouldn't not be able to pass the firefighter's test, and then the standards are lowered for a woman to make room for a woman, and everybody's life is put at risk as a result. It's happening everywhere. So I take issue with that. We disagree.
I would take issue with, just if I could...
Yes, go ahead.
I would take issue with that as well. And again, I'm not saying that women are just going to see something on TV and decide to change their mind all of a sudden. I'm talking about a slow and subtle social conditioning that usually starts from a very young age. I would be willing to bet that most 6-year-old girls are not sitting down listening to the feminist talk show where they say, "You're a girl, you can do whatever you want."
Have you ever seen little boys and girls naturally, like small, go toward different types of toys? The studies that happen where girls will naturally go toward more girly toys and boys will go to, not all the time, but they will little 1 year old. They're different. Like, and then it's like, oh, it's society telling girls they need to play with the doll. And no, it's not society telling a 1 year old that she's going to play with a doll. It's a 1 year old girl, female, looking at a doll and being different than the boy that's banging the truck. You can go into I have a little boy, you have a little girl. I'm sure you've been to a playground or two in your day. I go to playgrounds all the time. You walk into these playgrounds, you see male and female, little kids, behaving. My mom says to me every day, oh my gosh, my kid is a maniac. He's a boy. He is wrestling. Yeah. He is rough and tumble. My 2-year-old is crazy. Yeah. He is insane. It's not the same. You see little girls and boys, small, 1 year old, 2 years old, they are fundamentally different in terms of how they behave. Already the hormones are playing a role. And I'm not saying everyone, I'm not saying you can't have an outlier, but preferences are not all societally informed. Mm-hmm. And you see that, you wouldn't see evidence so young. It's just, I feel like there is an effort to just if we just took away the talking points for a second and just thought about life and thought, we would just be like, okay, men and women are different, boys and girls are different. Okay, done. It wouldn't be so controversial.
But if we went your route, that would be like, okay, well, why are there more male doctors? Well, probably just because they're just naturally kind of gravitate towards that. They're just kind of better. Maybe men are more rational, you know?
No, there are more if there are not female doctors right now, it's because women aren't pursuing those fields. It's because they don't want to.
But that is my
point.
Who
cares though? They don't want to.
Wait. You're proving my point right now. You're saying women don't want to pursue those fields. Do you think that society is going to have an influence on what you want to pursue in your life? Do you think that society is not going to have some impact there? This is why. So a lot of people will talk about, they'll say, who was it? Just Pearly Things brought up, because somebody referenced the wage gap, which, by the way, is a BS talking point. Don't get me wrong. And then she said, well, women ask for raises less. That's true, yes. Why? Does it have anything to do with the fact that women are expected to be more agreeable, a little bit kinder, kind of go with the flow? There are expectations and social influences that heavily impact the decisions we make. I feel like the problem we're getting
I don't think so. I think that women are more agreeable. I don't think they're expected to be more agreeable. They are more agreeable. Again,
so what would you say then about the doctor thing? Do you think that women are just better or just not as naturally good at doctors?
No, I think that women should do what they want to do. I think women should do what they want to do. And I think if they want to become doctors, there's plenty of room for you to become a doctor. And if you don't want to become a doctor, you shouldn't become a doctor. And I don't think you should blame society for the reasons why you don't become a doctor.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm not trying to blame society. If you're not qualified or you fail your test or whatever, that's your fault.
But the reasoning for why that individual woman is driven toward being a doctor, I mean, I can't explain that to you. All I can tell you is that from very small, men and women are different.
Yes.
And we just acknowledge that biology plays some role. You can't
You're look at a school. To the biology, acting like that's the main thing, though.
It is.
There is a biological thing.
So you're saying there is a biological component, but the societal influence is more significant. And I'm saying that the biology is more significant, but the societal influence plays a role. So that's all.
But then how does the biological thing play into with women deciding to not be doctors? How does that play in? Where is that a biological thing?
I'm not. That wasn't my argument. That was your argument. You're asking me to enter your
I'm asking you to explain why, when there's discrepancies here, why this...
I can't explain to you why women... There's plenty of women doctors. I don't see a discrepancy in the number of men and women doctors anywhere that I go. I don't see that ratio even. The reason I brought up education and the reason I brought up engineering is because you do see that ratio of men, much more men over here and much more women. Mm-hmm. I'm not willing to sign on to some version of reality where that is primarily due to social engineering in some way. I am not willing to sign on that dotted line. I am willing to sign on the dotted line of there is a societal impact. It all affects us. We watch television. We consume magazines. It's a reality of who we are. But I'm not willing to say that it is the primary or main reasoning as to why those different choices happen.
Right. And I would just kind of go back to, I know STEM is not the same as engineering, but I would just
STEM's a little bit different, yeah.
I would just go back to the fact that if that were the case, then I don't know why women actually thrive in some of these environments. So there's less women that go
Define thrive.
There's less women that go into...
Define thrive.
Hold on. There's less women that go into STEM. Mm-hmm. When women are part of STEM, they thrive there, meaning they offer significant contributions to the field.
That's not what thrive... That's a definition of thriving. Again, Are they happy? Are they fulfilled? I don't know. I can't answer that question for you, but that has nothing to do with it.
Yes, it does. It has everything to do with it because you're saying that would be natural. So if it's natural,
about,
then why are they still good at it?
You're talking about the outliers. The women who go into that are the outliers. They exist. Yes, they're having a great time. They're loving it. They're the outliers. I'm talking about I'm not talking about, say, the 5% that are in there and thriving and happy. Maybe let's assume they're happy. You're whatever. But the 95% that aren't. That makes up why. Why did that distribution happen that way? Let's think about it. Maybe more men are inclined to do this by virtue of something that's not societal. Maybe there's something going on. Interesting.
But that's what doesn't make sense to me. Maybe I can clarify better.
And then we have to wrap. I want to go to another point because we're at 2:45. So.
All right. Sorry. Let me I'll wrap up with this.
Yeah.
If there was a primary natural thing here,
a
drive or an inclination, then I wouldn't expect to see women who are, according to you, going against their biological inclination to succeed and contribute to these fields.
I'm not saying
if they're going against their biology, why are they doing well?
I'm not saying you're going against your biological. That didn't come out of my mouth. I didn't say going against your biological inclination. What I said is that biology and hormones and who you are as a man versus who you are as a woman informs the types of decisions that you make. And there are more women doing this and more men doing that. And there are some women over here who are thriving, and there are some men over here who are teachers and whatnot and thriving. But if we can look at the why of why there are so many more women over here and so many more men over here, there might be something to it beyond societal influence. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
We can agree to disagree.
We can agree to disagree.
We have to agree to disagree, otherwise
if we need to move on.
Yes. Okay. I want to ask you, just because I'm not sure which topic to go to here. I want to pick the most interesting one for where we might.
What are the options?
So, did you support the mandates and all that with?
Do we want to talk mandates? We can talk LGBT. I don't know what else.
What would you like to talk about? Because I'm happy to talk. I actually have a couple of. Do you support the mandates though? I just want to ask before I go into, because if you didn't, then it's
no. I'm okay with them. I'm not like yay mandates, but
okay, so maybe
I definitely disagree with some of the things you've said about that.
Okay, so we can do that. We're gonna do two more, Deli. Do we have 10 and up?
We have a lot. Yeah, surprisingly.
Okay, so then we're gonna have to do 15 and up. Okay, do you have a hard out?
No.
Okay.
I mean,
I might have a hard out,
I
might have a hard out, but the boys are going to be like, get out of there, Jen. Let's do some chats because let's do 10 and up. And then I want to get to a tweet of yours. We'll do about LGBT because I know you're very passionate about that now. And
Can I see the tweet just out of curiosity that you saved?
Sure. Let me. Oh, I didn't.
Was it that one there?
I don't. No. This is what is a woman. I don't want to do that one. Go ahead, Deli. You can start. I don't have it here. It's
Wally Wall sent in $10. He says, I like to say it's more like spending your youth as opposed to wasting it. It's being used the way she wants it. It may not be optimal for a man looking for love, but it's good for a good time.
Yeah, you know what? You know how I feel about male promiscuity too. That's a dark hole too. I wouldn't spend my time doing that if I was a guy either, to be honest. I
agree with you.
Disaster.
Promiscuity in general is probably just not a good idea.
It's just not good. It's a black hole. Focus on yourself, make some money, become financially stable, exercise, eat right, take care of your mental and physical health before you go down that dark hole. That would be my advice.
John said, what Jed's talking about where people lie on surveys is called social favorability bias, essentially where people answer questions in a way they think will be viewed favorably by others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it happens too often, but it's part of human nature.
This is from Omega. He says, Hunter does not understand that the trends of women affect the attitudes of women. Likely it is women who are the ones that enforce and bemoan masculine stoicism. Men typically do what women want.
Yes, that is, I hear this point a lot, and that is like verbatim just proving me correct. When we're talking about a socialized or socialization in regards to the masculinity, then women also witness that. Women are also seeing what is perceived as masculine and what isn't. So yeah, some women are going to be turned off by her man getting emotional or crying or whatnot. That doesn't mean that this isn't a social thing that needs to change.
That's not what happens though. You and I could do like hours on just society. It happens because, again, I'm going to bring you back to the biological component of this.
Because I have something about that then
there's a fragility that females feel in life due to, number one, our size and stature. We're just smaller. Like in the same way that a woman can walk down a dark alley, and even if there's a guy approaching who's big, he may be totally harmless. We instantly are like checking to make sure, like, can we get out of here? Like, what's
right.
We just have that. Yeah. So what becomes problematic for us is if a guy isn't is overly emotional in the sense that he doesn't have control of his emotions, if he doesn't know how to exercise control, that means that we can't lean on him, that
I
he's
agree
not
with
a
you.
stable force. So I think more than a conversation about like, men shouldn't be told you can't cry, but men having control of their emotions is also important, because it can be scary to be with a man who doesn't, because then do they have a propensity toward violence? Do they have a propensity toward anger? So that's a little bit of a different angle from a female
Actually, I think
perspective.
we would totally agree with that.
Okay.
That's kind of goes back to the emotional intelligence
Yeah.
thing, which is just recognizing the time and place to express certain emotions. And if one of those emotions is crying or being vulnerable, recognize the situation and act appropriately.
We agree there. See, common ground what has been found
Yes.
in numerous areas. I will say that. Okay. Not numerous. Okay, maybe a few.
Master Noob says, question for you two. Since we expect men not to show any emotion, do you think women are equipped to receive and handle men's emotion?
Well, a lot of the times, like what I was referencing with the
What we
divorce
just said,
thing,
yeah.
it's more so the opposite. It's more so that women want their partner to be in touch with his own emotions and be able to be emotionally intelligent and stable to provide her that degree of emotional intimacy that she wants as well. So I think it would probably be the other way around.
Also, what we just said about a man being in control of I think you can show emotion as long as you're in control of what's going. Like, you don't seem like you've kind of like lost it.
You're not going to start
That's
wailing
scary.
if like your ice
No,
cream.
it becomes scary, because
And
then it's like,
honestly-
are you going to start like, you've lost it then.
Yeah. And honestly, just really quickly, I would say that that's rule should really apply to both men and women. There's a time and a place to express certain emotions, and you need to recognize that and act.
You mean I
appropriately.
can't throw myself on the floor in a fit of panic? That's going to really affect
I mean,
my
if
day.
you do, it'll be
Listen,
biological,
That's really
so I'll just
going.
be
It will be
kinda laughing at you,
biological,
so.
100%, and I'm going to do it. And my husband accepts it because he's biologically wired differently. Okay. Next.
Jamie says, society runs on a clear structure of hierarchy, and that trickles down to the household dynamic as well. There has to be a clear hierarchy present in the household as well, not a partnership.
I completely disagree, and all available evidence suggests otherwise. When people are in equal partnerships, not a hierarchy, those marriages thrive. They have less likelihood of divorce. They're overall happier, healthier, and have more sexual satisfaction.
I don't understand really how that manifests in I'm very big on like language, hierarchy. How does that manifest in behavior? What does that look like? Partnership, like what does that mean? What does
sort
that
of what you're
look
talking
like?
about. Like one is on top,
Head of
the man is
household,
head,
yeah,
and then there's the girl.
But I don't know how that behaviorally, when they're talking about like how that behaviorally manifests necessarily. Somebody could be head of household, and it's a situation of mutual respect, and it's just that's all those words get fuzzy to me in terms of delineations and subjectivity and all that. Okay, now that I made no sense, no, it's fine. I made sense to me is all that matters.
All right. Leon says, women expect you to be the provider because in case she gets pregnant, she wants to be taken care of.
Yeah, that's biology.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be times, that you should probably choose your partner accordingly. And if your goal is to have a child, and especially if your goal is to be a stay-at-home mom and raise that child, then you're obviously going to want to pursue somebody who can provide for you financially.
Yeah, even if you're not going to be a stay-at-home mom, there's a grace period when you have a baby that you need a minute. Like, you're not going to be able to go right back to work. And women who do go right back to work, it's not easy. There's a
Some maternity
hormonal
leave,
stuff
right?
going on. Yeah, not everybody gets that though, and that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, go ahead. Doug.
Liquid says, true but very factual statement. The more sexual partners you have, the harder it is for the pair bonding to occur, which leads to less successful marriages, especially if both parties have a high body count.
Yep.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Miguel says Hunter lacks experience, and that's why he cannot compare the reality of the behavior of men and women. In a few years, you will see that many men have already experienced. Many of us were like him.
Well, he's married, so I don't think he's going to be
Experienced what?
experiencing anything, unless he's got some type of fancy marriage like Destiny. I don't know, but
Yeah, I don't know what experience what.
you have a closed marriage, right?
Yeah.
Is that okay? You don't have to say it, but
Sorry to everybody watching.
all the fangirls are like, dang. Okay.
All the red pill guys who just love me. So.
Alvin says, Hunter, from a Gallup, 50% of women and kids under 18 prefer to be homemakers, while 45% prefer to work outside of home.
What year was that done? Because the most recent Gallup poll suggested that 56% of women wanted to work. I didn't look and see. I don't know if it was in. I don't know if it was in or out of the home. I mean, ideally, you would actually, if you had to have a job, right? Like, it would be the best to work from home so that you could.
Yeah, and
still,
how much they're saying they want to work, but do they want to work full time? Do they want to work part time? Do they want to have flexibility? Do they want to work from home? Because I personally, I do like to have something. Like, I love what I do, but If you told me I had to do this full time and be 8 hours a day, I'd be like, bye, see you later. Like I couldn't, that would not be for me.
Well, I like being able to work from home because I can have that balance.
So you could sit at your computer and yell at people like me all day long, which is not a bad gig.
And I don't have to worry about them punching me, which right now I kind of do.
There you go. And I
gotta
work
tone
out,
it down.
so you know it is what it is. Okay.
Deadly Raver says, if you want to see the difference between men and women in the workplace, go back to when Elon Musk said we're about to go hard and do long hours in Twitter. Who left and who stayed?
Oh yeah, did you see that photo?
No.
You ever see that photo? There's a photo out there of like post Musk and before Musk. It's like all men. It's all male. It's funny. It's just a joke, but a funny one nonetheless. Okay.
Fahad said, if women were shown the photo of Madame Curie, they would have gravitate to baking with radiation.
Oh my gosh.
And
Do we have any more big ones? Because I have to get to the
definitely-
next two.
To clarify, that is not at all what I said or meant. But
We're actually on the last super chat, and it says, what up? Don't agree on much, but I got to show Hunter love.
There you go.
Wow.
No, people appreciate the conversation. They do. Everyone's been very respectful when I've had people who disagree. It's just what the space is. So, okay, I want to go to Deli. Can you do me a favor? Actually, maybe it is this one. Now that I'm looking, it might be this one where you went against Sneeko. Let's go. Yeah, I'm not sure 100% this is it, but if it is, you're free to look at it. It's your words.
Oh yeah.
Can we go to number 5 in the chart where it says wokeness in schools? There's a tweet. I just want the audience to be able to see it, and then I'll need this so I can read it.
I would love to talk about that.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, so Hunter writes, first of all, Sneeko had put a tweet out with a photo. You can see in that photo that it's a whole bunch of little kids. I don't know how old they are. Looks like 4, 5 to me, holding up pride flags. And Sneeko wrote, wokeness is the real pandemic. Hunter tweeted above it, because he trolls Sneeko. We can acknowledge that happens. It says, nothing more terrifying than kids learning gay people exist. Explain. And then I'll tell you why I don't think that's what's happening here. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like there's this consistent uproar, especially among the more right-leaning conservative side of things. So I'm not saying this is necessarily you, but I've definitely noticed there seems to be this weird uproar of people getting mad anytime kids are introduced to the fact of reality that gay people exist. Mm-hmm. It's very strange. A little while back, I mean, the Matt Walsh, Brandon Tatum, a couple conservative big names were just freaking out that Peppa Pig had like a 6-second scene where she had 2 moms and nothing about it was inappropriate. She was like, my mom is a doctor and my other mom makes me spaghetti, or it was like something so innocent. Mm-hmm. And again, it's like people act like this is indoctrinating children or something, which is it indoctrinating kids to take them to a wedding? A heterosexual wedding? Is it indoctrinating kids when they turn on the TV and their little cartoon shows Superman kissing the girl or whatever? Like, I just feel like it's very double standard.
So let me comment on that. I can't speak to Peppa Pig because I haven't seen the piece that they're commenting on. I got to get with it. I don't watch a lot of cartoons, Matrix programming. You know how it is. Anyway, so I don't watch that, but I would want to see it before I commented on it. But I can speak to this. So when I saw this, the reason I pulled this is because, and can you flash that on the screen again one more time so the audience can see it? Okay. The reason that I pulled this is because I am somebody who believes, listen, you're a grown adult, you're not hurting anybody else, live the life you want to live. I don't care. I really don't. I have friends that have all different ways of life, all different lifestyles, and as long as they're not harming somebody else, fine. One, the reason that this is a problem for me is because we've now gone from a society of acceptance of what I just said, of like just, hey, live your own life, do whatever you want, to a society where we need other people to put a stamp of approval on our behavior. And if they don't, there's something wrong with them. So there's a difference between kids knowing that gay people exist, and maybe you have a gay couple who's like you're friends with, and they come over to the house and you explain to your kids in your own terms, your own language, like, hey, they have a little bit of a different relationship. However you want to have that conversation, fine. And I do think kids should be informed of realities of the world, because this is the world we live in. We don't want them to be like thinking there's something wrong or something like that. There's a difference between that and handing out, hey, everybody color your pride flag, hold it up, put your in class, wave around, show that you endorse it, show that you support it. Hey, this is a cool, woke classroom. Look, let's take a photo and show everyone that I'm not on board with that, because I don't need a school to decide that my child should or shouldn't be endorsing a certain way of life. So I think we're now a society that's deeply troubled, where we're like, you need to put on a badge, you need to put on a sticker, you need to have the pronouns in your bio, you need to have the Ukrainian flag in your bio. It's all of this need for someone else to endorse what's going on. And I think the reason that people are getting concerned about kids is because you see these like drag shows that are, going on with kids. Now, I don't have any problems with a drag show for adults. You want to go do a drag show? Like, I've been to a drag show. In fact, in New York City, there's what's that place called? Lucky Chang's. Mm-hmm. People go, it's fun, whatever, ha ha ha, bachelorette parties, whatever. Mm-hmm. But when you have little kids now and you have drag story hour and you have these conversations happening among children, why do you need that to be happening at that level?
Right.
So this is a conversation for me that is about children and parental rights and the rights of you as a parent to decide how to have those conversations with your kid, and not sending what if you were a religious guy? I don't know if you are or not, but let's say you were Christian and you believed that homosexuality was a sin, that was your own belief. The manifestation of that, meaning sexual acts between, people of the same sex, whatever your belief is, and that child came out of that family and went to a school and now had to color the pride flag, and that made, why does that child have to endorse that behavior?
Right.
So that's where my concern lies. And I don't know if that's where Sneako's coming from. My concern is not people are supposed to hate on gay people. I don't want that. I don't want to hate, but I also don't want this forced endorsement or you're the bad guy. Right. Do you see where I'm coming from with that?
I absolutely do. And I think that it's also interesting that it kind of shows our different perspective on that, because I think you see that as an endorsement. I see that as just acceptance. That's how kids learn. They color some pictures. They learn about what it means that some people are gay and that some people are different, and that's okay. It doesn't make them weird, and they have a little flag. I can understand, though, your concern with the actual endorsement of it. I can understand the concern there. When it comes to the drag show, the drag queen story hours or whatever, that's just it's almost, I'm not dismissing what you said. It's just kind of in my mind a red herring. It's it's a problem, yes, and everybody is right to kind of shit on it, especially we've seen clips of them get pretty inappropriate and whatnot. But to me, that's kind of a side thing, whereas if we're going to talk about this, we should kind of isolate that, where if you're drawing a picture of a gay flag, it doesn't necessarily mean that tomorrow we're going to the field trip to see the strip drag show. Or
it doesn't, but the way this happens in schools, so I don't know how much you know about me. I was a school teacher before I did this, before I got into television, which is 10 plus years ago. I taught middle school, high school, and college. I taught in the recent school. I taught in 3 schools. I taught in a college for a year. I taught in a Catholic school for a year. And then I taught for 6 or 7 years in a private school on the Upper East Side in New York City. Super liberal. I mean, to the point where it was activism, out front and center every day. And what I saw was stuff like this get contextualized in a hyper-political way for very small children often. So I think when people see this, you may see it as oh, they're just coloring a flag. What's the big deal? But somebody else might look at this and say, well, who's contextualizing that conversation? What is the adult saying? Are they saying this is something we should all embrace? Are they saying this is a sign that you're not bigoted? Are they saying this is a sign that you're, loving someone else? And are they saying everyone has a right to live the life they want and you should welcome? All of that messaging is inappropriate for children of this age to be receiving from anyone other than their parents or their guardians. So that's where it comes into play, where it may look to one person as oh, who cares? They're coloring a flag. Who cares? What if it's BLM the next day? What if it's, frankly, what if it's a Republican message, a Democrat message, whatever? I want all of the politics out of the schools.
I think that's a bit of the problem is, now granted, sure, maybe you're not a fan of this, but it does seem that we generally agree that it's okay that kids learn. Say, hypothetically, there was a lesson today we're going to talk about different types of families. Some families, you have a mommy and a daddy. Some families actually have 2 daddies, 2 mommies. If it was something like that, I would assume you'd probably be okay with that. So
I actually don't know why that would need to happen in a school, though. I do think those conversations, by the way, should happen at home. But what class is that happens in?
Well, I don't know what class it would be, but I mean, gay
and
people
how old are we talking about, kids?
I don't know, 6. I'm fine with 6-year-olds learning that.
That's pretty small. It's a pretty young. And it depends what kind of institution you're in. Are you in? Obviously, if you're in a Christian school or something like that, that's not going to be happening. Is it a public school you're talking about, a government-funded school?
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is that it's gay people just existing, not necessarily this specific tweet, but gay people existing and being taught that's not political. Mm-hmm. And people make it political, and it is a political issue in so much as we should have our right to get married and whatnot. But when you compare that to drawing flags of Republicans or BLM stuff, those are overtly political movements.
So here's how it becomes political, though. It becomes political or it becomes activist if rather than just saying, hey, The reality is there are different types of families that exist out there. Some look like this, some look like this. Neutral, right? That's a neutral. I just disseminate that information and you have no idea how I feel about the issue. You just know that I'm telling you facts. Is it said like that, or is it said from the perspective of someone saying, hey, it's perfectly okay, this is healthy, blah, blah, blah. Now, I may have no problem with that message. You may have no problem with that message, but somebody at home who's of religious identity may have a problem with that message because to them it's not healthy and it's not okay.
Yeah.
So now
that's where you get into some.
I don't want any of that in schools. I really want kids to go to school and learn to read, learn to write, learn to do their math, learn to do their spelling, especially at that age. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see any let that conversation happen. And if a kid raises their hand, this is the position I took. If a kid raises their hand and asks a question like that, you know what? Why don't you talk to your mom and dad about that? I'm going to give them a call later today. Maybe they need to have a discussion with you. Pick up the phone, call that mom and dad and say, hey, listen, your kid's asking questions. I don't feel like I'm the appropriate person to contextualize this. That's not what we're about here, but you need to. I think you should. That's where my position lies on that.
Well, I think that when you talk about kids maybe or parents kind of have an issue with their children learning, like what we said, like different types of families or whatnot, I think that is actually the indoctrination that a lot of people don't think about, because indoctrination by definition is teaching somebody to, in this case, it would be accept or dislike something uncritically. So yes, if you're sitting children down and you're saying gay people are good, don't question it, if you do, you're a bigot, I'm against that, because that would be by definition a form of indoctrination. Mm-hmm. But when you have parents who are religious, who are usually dogmatic in that religion, where it's already not acceptable to question certain religious beliefs, and now they're saying that they want to deprive their child of learning certain realities of the world.
Well, I don't think that's what they're saying.
But it is. You're saying they would have a religious objection to it.
I'm saying they'd have a religious objection to someone contextualizing it as condoning that behavior. And I'm not going to tell them.
I don't think that kids should sit down with their
that's not
bigoted mom and dad.
But that's not. But it's not bigoted. If they're religious and they believe homosexuality is a sin, that's not bigoted.
Wait, yes, that is. Yes, it is. That is.
Religion is bigoted. Religious people are bigoted.
Religious beliefs that homosexuality is a sin is absolutely bigoted.
So how, like, all Catholics are bigoted?
If you believe that homosexuality is a sin, that belief is bigoted.
So people who believe in the Bible, they're all bigoted? That's silly. I mean, listen, there are people who believe that a lot of the population is religious and holds. I personally don't.
And who's the least accepting of gay people? It's the white evangelicals.
But
U.S. Muslims, Muslims are more accepting of gay people in this country.
I personally don't have to agree with that. Like I just said, a bunch of gay friends, they live their life. I don't care. I was one of the people that said, you want to get married, get married. Like I just, that's not my issue.
Well, then where do you draw the line?
Where I draw the line is that even though I'm personally of that view with my child, I don't believe that it's the responsibility, the job, or the appropriate place for a school to make that call and tell my kid what should be societally acceptable, what they should endorse, what is healthy, what is bigoted. Like that, no. Because there's too many people that there are religious people who just believe that by virtue of the Bible. Like, they're not hateful people.
You don't have to be hateful to be bigoted towards gay people.
But how's that bigoted to say that if they believe that homosexuality is a sin by virtue of the Bible and by virtue of their adherence to the Bible, why is it that it's not fair to call them bigoted just because they're adhering to those principles?
So let me, back in when the U.S. slave trade was still occurring, biblical verses were cited to justify slavery.
But you're not justifying. They're not talking about violence toward gay people.
I know. But what I'm saying is that people have, throughout history, used the Bible to justify certain views that they already hold. In the case of the slave trade, would it be bigoted if somebody said, it's my religious belief that black people are inferior to white people?
But that's not what they're saying. They're
but
not
I'm
saying
asking would that be bigoted?
No. Well, that's not the same. You can't correlate those two things, because these people aren't saying gay people are bad. They're not saying gay people are inferior. They're not saying gay people. They're saying the act of sex between two people of the same sex, to them, is a sin.
So would it be bigoted then to say that I think that
I'm not comfortable calling
interracial marriage is a sin? Would that maybe be?
That's not. The Bible doesn't say that. So listen, and I can't defend. You have the wrong person here if you're looking for me to be a defender of biblical text, because that's not my position.
I was raised Christian. Yeah.
But that's not my position. So I can't have that conversation with you. All I'm saying to you is that these individuals who, every household has a different way of different beliefs, right?
And some of the beliefs religions. But some of the beliefs are wrong. This is the thing.
So you want a child who comes from a Christian family, traditional values, traditional man, woman, you want that child to leave their family and go spend 8 hours a day, and they should go to school and be told that their family is bigoted, and that's cool?
No, I never said that. I said, between you and me, that I think that it's bigoted to believe that being gay is a sin. It would not be acceptable to sit your kid down or sit a student down and be like, your mom and dad are bigoted.
So what is
hold
cool
on,
then?
But earlier when we were talking about sort of like the biological thing and everything, a lot of the times this is reality. You've said that multiple times. Reality does not care. Gay people are part of a reality. Gay people
Yeah.
existing is part of a reality.
Yeah.
And bigotry against gay people, any kind of like a complete disgust or disdain or
not disgust,
or
though.
viewing it as sinful, because by definition you're saying that is a crime against God.
That's how religious people
But
feel about
that's-
homosexuality.
and that's wrong. That's incorrect.
Well, it's not up to you to
only is
judge
it-
that, though.
Wait.
It's not
not
up
only
to you
is
to
it
judge that.
how are they
believe-
determining that it's wrong?
Listen, it's not up to you to define for them how they feel about behavior. It's not up to
I
them
don't care
to
how they
define
feel.
for you. But
Facts
that is
don't
how
care.
they
Wait,
feel.
facts don't care about your feelings.
But it's not a fact. They're grounded in the Bible, in a religion, in
So
religious
why is it bad
dogma.
then? Yeah. So then why is it bad?
I'm not here to decide whether it's bad or not.
Why do you think they think
I
it's bad?
disagree with that assessment, but I also don't want that child. I don't need that child who comes from that family to go into a school and be told that the way they're being raised, there's something wrong with it, or being shown an alternate reality.
Because they've been indoctrinated.
But
The
that's not
alternate
indoctrination.
reality is
Listen,
the facts of the world.
Hunter, let me tell you something. Every single kid that comes out of a family has received some level of indoctrination just by virtue. You come out of your house and you're exposed. Your kids are going to be exposed to your views. They're going to be exposed to your wife's views. There's going to be a set
And
of
I
values.
don't teach my kids that they can't question the views or that they must accept them
That's
uncritically.
fine. That's fine. And you don't know that how those households exist either. All I'm saying to you is that there are people out there who have children. They have a certain set of morals. They are religious. They send their kids to school. They know that gay people exist. Maybe they even have gay friends. Maybe they're not. They're just saying that they are religious. They don't need their kids to go to an institution of higher learning and receive messaging from a teacher who maybe was supposed to be doing ABCs that day and instead is giving a lesson on acceptance.
Right.
That's not what school is.
You had a problem with it appearing as though they're endorsing this, but yet in this case, it would be the Christian parents who are not accepting it. They're not endorsing it.
They don't have to accept it.
Well, hold on. I know. They're not accepting it. They're not endorsing it. They're actively against it.
They're just not. They
That's
just
the
don't
other
want their
side of the
child to
coin.
be.
That's the other side of the coin, though.
just-
If you say you don't want kids to be taught to endorse this thing,
But you're right
then
as a
kids shouldn't
parent.
be taught to be completely against this thing.
Your kids can be taught whatever they want by their parents.
Okay, obviously. However, in principle,
Yeah.
they would need to establish what is sinful about being gay. What actually makes it
They
a
don't
sin?
have to establish that for you. They can tell you to go read the Bible and they can
I've
talk to
read
you
the
about their
Bible.
religion,
And
and
guess
that's
what?
their
You know what? You want to know what the
justification
answer
for it.
is? Because God said so.
Okay, cool. Then
It's dogmatic.
'cause
It's
God said so.
indoctrination.
That's not
And so-
indoctrination. That's not
That's
indoctrination,
literally
though. That's what religion
accepting
is.
it uncritically.
That is what religion is.
It's literally
People who
God
have
said
faith,
so. That's uncritical. That's
That
ultimate
is what
authority.
religion is. I'm not, listen, and I don't have, you're asking me to defend something that's not my position, but that is what religion is. Their faith is by nature a belief in a force bigger than yourself that is unquestioned. That is religion. So you're asking religious people to not be religious. We can't do that.
That's not true. You can be religious. You can believe in God. You can also believe that God created everybody in his image, that God loves everybody.
You know what?
That God wants us to care for the sick and the poor, which is in the book of Matthew. And when you look at the biblical verses that allegedly condemn homosexuality, first of all, the main one they bring up, I want to at least say this for the audience because I was raised Christian. The main ones they bring up are the Levitical verses where it says, a man who lies with another man is an abomination.
Mm-hmm.
That is from a specific part of the Bible that is a ritual purity code that was given from God to the Israelites specifically.
Okay, but
to separate them from the nations around
But
them.
you don't have an
And so-
argument from me on this.
I'm not.
You
I'm not.
and I
I'm giving
aren't-
the general. I'm giving an
you
explanation as to
should
why I
have
believe
that
this
debate
thing.
with somebody who knows. Like, hey, you want us to have that conversation? My recommendation is talk to Ali Beth Stuckey.
I'm not saying. I'm not saying that this is what you're saying. I'm
that's-
just trying to substantiate
But
my
that
own
doesn't
claim.
change the reality of what school should be and what school is. And school is not a place where one person's version of morality or one person's version of anything, that's not where that should be happening.
How are they determining morality?
Well, this is
'Cause
their
God
version
said
of
so?
this is their version. No. Those families are not bringing their values into the school system and exposing other kids to it. They are exposing their own child to it, which are perfectly within their right to do. This school is imposing a value system on other children, on many children, one of whom comes from, say, a family like that. That is not within the right of that school to do. There's a distinction there.
So what
you
if
can
somebody
argue,
did? What would you say genuinely? Because there have been religious arguments in the past to try and argue against, say, interracial marriage. What would be the argument there? Would that not be acceptable, or would that still stand
why are
because
you?
it's
But
on the religious?
I just don't understand. That's a silly. First of all, that's completely silly.
No, it's not.
But it
Because
is. But
hold on, wait.
that's
No,
not what the
this
conversation is
there's-
about. The conversation is about school. We're talking about. This is a picture of 4 and 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
Should school for 4 and 5-year-olds involve holding up, coloring pride flags, holding them up, posing for the camera? That's what this
I
conversation
can understand
is about.
the concern with that.
That's where,
However,
that's
if we're talking more principally, as in, should 4-year-olds and up learn generally that other families exist and some of those families are gay? Yes.
Cool.
And I think that if
let
a parent,
them learn that from their parents.
No, because the parents, like you just said, could be some religious person who has no justification for their
school-
beliefs.
But that's not what school is.
School is intended to not
you
only
talking-
educate you on certain academic
Nope.
factors, but it also does give you an introduction to general social roles
So
as
should
well.
school also
Social
be talking
rules.
about pedophilia? Should school also be talking about? I mean, some things are just like not.
This is why it's so important to have the morality question that I feel like you don't want to have. Pedophilia, what does it do? Harm. What happens with gay people getting married? No
okay.
harm. And wait, furthermore-
Pedophilia causes harm, but you have to understand that there are people who believe if you are a traditional values person, you're religious, you're following the Bible,
They have
you
unjustified
believe,
belief.
you believe, whatever it may be, you can call it unjustified all you want, but they believe it's justified based on their faith. They believe that any structure outside of that leads to the breakdown of the family, and they believe it is hazardous. They're not saying gay people are bad people.
They
are
can believe that,
saying
but that doesn't mean it's right or anything.
it doesn't.
And
But it
so-
also doesn't mean that school becomes a location that can then try to change their kid's mind about that issue. That's not for school to do.
Trying to change their mind would again imply that you're being sat down and told
activism.
your family's being a bigot.
It's activism.
No, I'm not in favor of activism. The example that I gave you, the hypothetical that we're talking about, is
But that's not what we're talking
lesson
about.
Yes, it's a lesson
Okay,
about
so- and I'll tell
do
you this.
different families exist?
When
That's the
let
question.
me hear how that teacher talks about that lesson. Let me hear how that teacher intros that lesson. Let me hear what that lesson plan looks like. What does the homework look like related?
Okay,
Play that
here-
out for
here-
me,
okay,
and then
yeah.
not now. I'm saying we can't because we have to do one more topic before we let you go. It's 3:15. We've been talking for 2 hours and
Well,
15
wait,
minutes.
because I don't want to back off this one just yet, because this is there's like a fundamental disagreement.
Deli's
here.
like, free deli, free deli.
I'm sorry, but there's like a fundamental disagreement here, is that just if somebody has religious beliefs or their religion says that they're against something, doesn't always justify them being able to step in and prevent their child from learning that. What if somebody
That's not what I'm saying. That's not the argument here, though.
What if somebody believes that according to the Bible, the world is flat? Should their kids not be allowed to learn that because they have a religious problem?
That's a fact. That's a factual.
It's a fact that
that's
gay
a
people
fact.
exist, and it's a fact
Yes,
that it's genetically.
It's a fact that gay people exist. And what I just said to you is that show me that teacher. Show me that she's not, some steward of the system, and
But this is the-
show me what it looks like. Because what I did for you is I didn't create a hypothetical. I showed you a photo.
Mm-hmm.
This is a problem.
I'm okay with that.
So we
generally
need to see
speaking.
what that is. And you know what? Maybe I'll say to you, that's not a problem. But I don't know what that looks like. And what I'm telling you is the reason that Sneako's talking about this, my guess, Sneako can speak for himself. Maybe he's here. I don't know. The reason that he probably has a problem with that is because this is happening in schools across the country right now. And it is activism in the classroom. It's not what you're saying. It's not gay people exist. This is a reality. This is just factual reality of the world we live in. Like it or not, this is that is not what's happening. I've been in multiple
seems as
classrooms.
though what they're saying is, hey, let's color in
No.
this picture.
That
Gay
is
people
not
exist.
what's
And, well,
happening.
hold on, wait.
That's
And
silly.
there is not.
Now you're going back on what you said.
Wait. And there's not anything wrong necessarily with people
No,
being gay.
you're going
They're
back on what you said because you
What am I
originally
going back on?
said this is a problem. Now you're saying it's not a problem. Here's the bottom line. If
Wait,
it was
I ne-
BLM flags, by the way, if it was
I never said that was a problem. I
Iraq
said I could
war flags.
understand the issue with teaching kids to endorse this, but
That's what it means.
but having kids draw a picture of
That
a pride
is an
flag
endorsement.
and then
These-
teaching them. Hold on, wait. And then teaching them that Gay people exist, gay people are real, and there's nothing
This is an
wrong with that.
endorsement.
It's okay to be different.
This is an endorsement. Look at the photo. Pay attention to what the children's faces look like. They're holding it up. Everyone's taking a picture. Yay, pride. Everyone's going to put them around the classroom. It's an endorsement. And this example is an endorsement.
So
we can take issue.
This is why I keep trying to ask you then when I give you a hypothetical that you don't want to get into.
I don't want a hypothetical because that hypothetical doesn't exist, and I'm dealing in this reality. This happened. This is a tweet you responded to. That's what we're talking about.
Yes,
Okay.
and people seem very, very fearful of kids learning
It's
about
not
gay
fear.
people.
It's just not fear. No one has said that. No one has said
He
that
said
they're
it's
fearful.
the real pandemic.
He said, there was no pandemic to start, but wokeness is the real pandemic. This is wokeness.
Okay, if wokeness then is teaching kids to be accepting of gay people, then I'm all for it.
that's not what they're teaching kids. They're not teaching kids to be accepting of gay people.
Yes.
They're teaching kids, here, color this. Homosexuality.
This is what it
great,
means to
put
be
it on.
gay. This is the flag for it. It's
You
okay to be
just
different.
said to me that you understood why this was a problem, and now you're walking it back.
You're misinterpreting what I said. I said that I understand how you might have an issue if you perceive that as an endorsement.
It is an endorsement.
So is it an endorsement or acceptance?
If they put these all over the classroom, the kids have colored these and they're being told, hey, this is, you should, this is a positive thing and
It's okay to
gay
be
marriage
gay.
is good and gay. I don't know what was said in this classroom, but I know as somebody, by the way, who doesn't have an issue whatsoever with people who are gay, who choose to live their lives the way they want, multiple people around me who live like that, cool, it's all fine, live and let live in that capacity. Personally, I don't have that issue. I still would not want to see that in my kid classroom because I would know there's a slippery slope between this and the next cause, and I don't want my kid in a cause classroom.
Right. Well, that's why the slippery slope is a fallacy by definition.
It's not. I was
Because
in these classrooms, and it's happening all the time. It happens with BLM. It happened with.
But you can be against that while also being okay with kids
I
learning to
don't
be
want my
accepting of gay
child.
people.
My child can know that Black Lives Matter exists. My child does not need to draw the Black Lives Matters flag
That's a
and
political
stand
movement.
and do this.
Black
It's
Lives Matter is not.
ridiculous.
Wait. Black Lives Matter is not an intrinsic quality of somebody.
This
Gay
is
people are
ridiculous.
genetically born
It's
genetically
silly. Hunter,
predisposed
it's
to
silly.
being gay.
It's a silly
Gay
conversation.
people
at this
are
point.
born genetically predisposed to
Fine,
being
and
gay.
and that's fine. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying I'm not going to talk to gay people. There's something
You
wrong
just
with
said
them.
that you don't want them learning the general
I said
stuff.
I don't want them programmed about this, about anything else. That is not the role of a school. That is not the role of an academic institution in any way,
They
shape,
pledge
or form.
allegiance to the flag like every day. That's a huge
First of all, they
political
don't.
statement.
They don't.
Well, I think honestly that's probably
They don't.
But for a long time, that was what was
99% of these
expected.
classes, but they don't. You understand?
So are you okay with that though?
You want to talk about the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the
Wait,
United States
Pledge
of
of
America
Allegiance, you're
and
literally
to the Republic for
saying,
which
"I
it stands,
pledge
one
my
nation under
allegiance."
God.
You're saying, "I
indivisible,
pledge my-"
liberty, justice for all. You can't have the pledge. First of all, you can't have the Pledge of Allegiance in most schools because they won't allow it because they won't have these kids say one nation under God. Okay. That's a reality. That doesn't happen. So we can't even correlate that. Okay, listen, I need to do one more.
Oh man.
I have to. I'm
I don't
sorry.
want to move on yet.
I know, but I have to. We could be here all day. It's like the gender construct
Can
thing.
I just say one more
Wait,
thing?
1 second.
Closing
Do we have super chats?
Yeah, we have one actually.
Okay, let's do that one because then we're going to close out super chats. By the way, folks, if you like this conversation, you got to hit the subscribe button. You got to hit the like button. You got to show that love. Yeah, do it right now. You know when I put the graphic on, I'm not very patient about that. Boom. Okay, we're done. Let's do that one. And then that's going to be it for chats. We're going to finish up because we have to let you out of here or they're going to kill me.
Okay.
This one says, it's from Omega. It says, "Hey Hunter, Matthew 5:17-20 is determined that until heaven and earth are destroyed, not one iota of Jewish law will be abolished."
Okay.
Okay. I don't know.
That's
what
it.
that-
No, I don't know.
I think he's saying because the Levitical laws say
I
being
don't
gay
have
is
enough
bad.
of a background on Leviticus, to be honest, to respond, but it's all you.
Well, I'll just say what I'm fine moving on, but I know we disagree on this, but at the end of the day, I understand your concern if they're being taught to specifically endorse something, which is what the Pledge of Allegiance did for a long time. Teach them to
Kids are
endorse
daily taught to endorse stuff. Daily. It happens every day.
every day. Until recently, kids had to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
The
which
Pledge
is
of Allegiance is
political
not
and an
endorsing,
endorsement.
not saying. I mean, I worked in a
They're
school where
pledging allegiance.
you
If I
listen
got
to-
up there and said I pledge allegiance to the gay, then everybody would be flipping the fuck out. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
You can't see the distinction between a country that you live in that you're an American citizen.
You're teaching kids to just
you
kind
can't
of
see the difference
blindly,
between
like, be
that.
all
You can't. No,
patriotic.
wait. You can't see the difference between you being an American citizen. You're a citizen of this country. You're pledging allegiance to the flag of this is my country. I'm proud of my country. Yes, my country can do better on some things, but I love my country and pledging allegiance to a flag that represents a certain type of lifestyle that you may or may not as a person endorse.
Right. So then it's not a lifestyle. That's the like.
But
it's
it's
not. Is there a straight lifestyle? Is it a lifestyle to be straight?
Yes, to have sex with somebody of the opposite
That's
sex.
not a lifestyle.
That's a component of it.
That's your sexuality, which is an
Okay,
intrinsic
cool.
component. A lifestyle would
but
be
you
I
don't
live
have
at the
to endorse
beach.
somebody else's sexual decisions the same way that I don't have to sit here and get behind. Somebody gets up tomorrow and says, "Oh, I identify as a cat," and I'm like, "Awesome, you can be a cat all you want, but I don't have to. I don't
keep
have to
going back to the
say
same thing we've already said.
because
you
I'm
don't
saying
need to
because
endorse
facts
it.
matter.
But and a fact is gay people exist. They're
Great.
genetically predisposed,
Great.
and there's no biblical
I have
basis
no
for
problem
disliking
with that.
gay people.
I have no problem that gay people exist. You're talking to the wrong person. I'm just saying activism in schools is a problem. End of story. That's the end of the conversation. Okay, do you want to do as a last topic? We're not going to be able to spend that much time on it, truthfully, just because of what's going on outside. It's going to get loud. But do you want to talk about? Do you have an opinion about Andrew Tate? Do you hate him? Do you want to talk about him?
I feel like we kind of already.
Or do you want to talk about? We have shame culture, the idea of fat shaming, and that, and I also have the stuff that Ron DeSantis did with the biomedical security state.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that. Why don't we talk about the shame thing?
Okay, so you had said something here. The biomedical security state, by the way, is just about the mandates and him providing protections for people against mandates. That's what he's basically. But I feel like people have heard me talk about that. You know where I'm going to stand on that, audience.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm actually kind of surprised we didn't get to the mandates.
We can. I mean, they're unconstitutional, whatever. But we can get to the mandates.
Oh man, I already disagree with you.
Yeah, they're not constitutional. They're not founded in it. You want to talk about that?
Where are they? How do you feel?
Here. No. Let's just. Well, can I just, because you put a tweet out, you asked about it. You had said shame culture only further isolates people with conditions that require treatment, not shame, which I thought was an interesting tweet you had put out. I don't have the tweet because I forgot to pull it, but that's what you said. Mm-hmm. And what I think is interesting about this conversation about fat shaming and about people can say slut shaming happens. I'm not for purposely hurting people. Like, I'm not like, oh, you're this, you're that, I want to raise a kind child. And right. I think that ultimately we should be kind to each other. But I think what has happened in society is a refusal and an inability to just acknowledge reality and fact. And now it's to a point where obesity is glorified. You've got fat is healthy all over the cover of magazines. That's a problem. Right. So where did we lose our way so much that you can't just be honest with people? Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat the fact that obesity is unhealthy. And if I were to sugarcoat it, by the way, I'd be doing a gross disservice to obese people, because now I'm telling you that your behavior is good. Oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Blah, 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 everything. In the meantime, you're more prone to all sorts of diseases, right. comorbidities,
Heart
and whatnot.
failure or whatnot, yeah.
So where do you stand on that? Because it's interesting to me. You said that. Do you sort of agree with what I'm saying about the fine line there between, you don't have to be an a-hole, but at the same time, people need to understand reality.
Right. So I guess I don't know if I agree or disagree fully, but I do agree with you in the sense that it's unhealthy to be overweight. And if anybody, there are people, yes, online who are arguing that it's actually completely fine. And some people are even saying that fat is a slur. I don't know if you've seen that. People are
I've seen it all.
Yeah, they're claiming it's a slur now to call somebody fat. So yes, the reality is it's unhealthy to be fat. That is a bad thing. It should not be encouraged. I think the problem is a lot of people are under the impression that because being fat is objectively unhealthy and bad, that I guess you said don't be an a-hole, but like a lot of people feel that they're justified in kind of, I don't want to say like shitting on fat people. I'm not really sure how to word it, but like people feel okay shaming fat people for being fat. People feel, because they're like, well, they're fat and that's bad and unhealthy. And if anything, I'm doing them a service. They need to know that it's unhealthy. The problem is, and I used to have this exact same position, by the way. I was of that opinion too. And I would always say that if you love your body, you should work to improve yourself. And I still stand by that. The thing with body positivity, it isn't, or it shouldn't be, about just accepting yourself the way that you are and then never striving to be better. What's important is a lot of people who are overweight, sure, there are some who literally just go to Dunkin' Donuts too much, whatever. But like, there are also people who have other conditions that have contributed to that obesity. And even if it hasn't, people who are obese are more likely to suffer from depression, insecurity, et cetera, which is kind of understandable. And when you shame fat people, that actually lowers their motivation to improve themselves. Because if somebody is, especially if they're really obese, odds are they are binge eating as a coping mechanism. And so it's not body positivity as in just accept yourself the way you are, never do anything differently. Yep. It's body positivity in, hey, this is your body. Be positive by the fact that this is your body. And it's that actually motivates the change, not the shame.
So the number of people where it's outside of their control those exist. You're talking about thyroid conditions. You're talking about stuff like that. It's actually quite small.
Well, not
it
even-
exists,
yeah,
but those things do exist. There are people with health issues, right? That they
Mm-hmm.
have trouble losing weight, but it's a largely societal issue now with us. I mean, we're deeply spoiled. I mean, the fast food, we're just a grossly unhealthy society at large. It's sad. And the reason that this really hits me is when I look at children that are obese, and I feel like now, because it's considered harsh, to say your child is obese, the language, everybody's afraid of the language, this, that, and the other thing. Everyone's afraid to just say what is. And really what we need to do is just acknowledge that these things are unhealthy. And it's not about, to me, it's not shaming. Now, granted, there are people that'll just be like, you're fat, and they're just mean people that exist, right? They exist to just spew. Maybe they're unhappy in their own lives. They're trying to hurt somebody else. I don't know what their motivation is. But there's other people that will just say, like I do, pull up a cup, and I take health very seriously. Like, this is a priority for me. And not only physical activity, but what I eat, it's important to me because I want to be here for my child, and that's why I do what I do.
Yeah.
But I'll put up a magazine cover and be like, it'll say fat is healthy. It's my job to say, no, this isn't healthy, actually.
Right.
This is deeply unhealthy, and this messaging that's particularly going to women, although you do see the dad bod go into the dads now. Oh, the dad bod is not sexy. Having fat around your middle is not sexy. You're
Come
increasing
on.
your chances of disease. You don't have a fat
Oh,
belly,
come
do you?
on.
Maybe I'm not seeing it. I don't know. Maybe
I was
next
trying to grow out
Maybe
the dad
next time
bod.
we need to do the bikini show or something so I can see what he's talking about. I don't know what he's talking about. But I'm tired of the neutered messaging to such a point where we can't as a society just face what's going on. Now,
Right. And I think that just to add on that, you're right. There is this hyper fragile sort of approach now that people have where it's like, yeah, fat is a slur, or don't be mean ever. Or if you say something that the other person perceives as being mean, now you're a bad person. I agree with that, but I think that the conversation needs to expand and become a little more nuanced because yes, some people are too fragile and shit on that all day, every day because people need to stop being so fucking fragile. And then on the flip side, the response to the fragility isn't, and I'm not saying you're an asshole to them because you're obviously not, but generally speaking, it's not shame culture, shame people for being fat. It's rather, here's the facts, being fat is unhealthy. And so this is your body. You should take pride in the fact that you only got one body, okay? You got one life. You need to do what is best for you so that, kind of like what you said, so that you're here as long as possible. And it's that type of messaging that motivates people to exercise and to lose weight. And just quickly, I'll say, I'm aware that obviously the majority of people that are overweight are not overweight due to some thyroid problem or whatnot. But even if, say, they are binge eating or maybe it's a mental illness or something, and then they become overweight, that raises their likelihood of struggling with depression and whatnot. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle where you shame them and then that actually kind of pushes them back into
you're saying it has a
binge.
negative effect and then it causes the behavior to spur even more out of control.
Right.
But
and the last thing I want to say is just a fun fact. Obviously, there are far more people in America that are overweight, but it is been proven that being underweight is worse for your health than being overweight.
Well, it depends. It depends on underweight. We talk about that too, eating disorders and the issue that happens. I actually told a story when I was much younger. I don't remember how young I was. What was I, 16? Crazy thing I did for a few months, and I literally shrunk my organs. It was it was deeply horrible. Wow. It was a period of I was looking to control my life. It was crazy. It was high school. I shared that with the audience. If you'd missed that, by the way, you should go back to the beginning and see. So I remember when Kate Moss was front and center, Calvin Klein ads, you can go back and look. There was a lot of talk. She was looking so frail, and that's a problem too, right? But that's not the predominant problem in America right now.
The
that's
main
the
thing
problem.
right now.
The main thing is you can't upset somebody's feelings, so we can't talk about reality and can't talk about the truth. Deli, do you know if they need us to wrap right now? Have they been bothering you? No? Sometimes they shout at me. I want to do one more thing with you. I was gonna make a suggestion that we could do this at a future date on Rumble.
Okay. Oh yeah, maybe that's because
I think that's probably a better place. Would you be open to? I would love to have a conversation with you about the mandates, but I need to have that in a different.
Would I be able to call in?
Would you be able to call in? And the reason I don't do call in a lot, or not call in, we do it remotely. We can just hook it in. I like to do a first meeting in person, and I'd like to know there's not going to be any funny stuff that goes on. Oh, you're going to click off if I say something more weird. I'm not into that.
No, I hate that too.
So if we can do that, I think that would be a better space for that conversation.
Would it be
for
okay
many
if,
reasons?
when we did that, I would probably be live on my own channel? If that's okay.
Yeah, we can negotiate all that and figure out. I'm sure that wouldn't be an issue at all. But
Yeah, no, I would
I think that's
love
a
to do
better
that.
house for that conversation
Yeah.
for many reasons. I don't know. The reason is I don't know what you're going to say. I certainly know what I'm going to say. So I just want to ask you a quick question. This is not planned. I wasn't even going to talk to you about this, but you had said in one of your videos, I remember, I talk a lot about the matrix. I talk a lot about the system. You had said something like, oh, there's not a cabal of people that are trying to destroy you. And I'm just curious if you really believe that. If you seem to me, we differ as far as our stand on issues. You don't come off to me as someone who's dumb. I will say
Thank
that. It seems to me that you would be somebody who would be cognizant of a potential World Economic Forum problem, of a problem with crony capitalism and multinational corporations holding hands with big pharma and potentially instituting policy that affects people against their will. Is that something? Am I wrong? Is that something that because when we talk about the matrix. When I talk about the matrix, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Klaus Schwab. I'm talking about people putting out videos saying you will have nothing and you will be happy. I'm talking about, a biomedical security state where people who have individual health conditions and individual relationships with their doctors can no longer make decisions about what they put into their own bodies. And now you have authoritarians wanting to make those decisions for you, even when it doesn't affect somebody else. That is what the matrix means to me.
Okay.
So
I
does
think
that sound legitimate? Do you see what I'm saying when I talk about that stuff?
I do, and I think that I think that maybe there's a little misunderstanding because obviously corruption is a thing. I'm not super caught up on every aspect of it, but yes, of course, there are problems with corruption. We hear a lot about how big companies tend to have more sway with certain governmental policy. Even, of course, corruption is a thing, and that when I hear the Matrix. Maybe this is why there's no real solid definition for it. But when I hear the Matrix, usually what that does make me think of is when I say a cabal, I mean the smoky room of a couple evil individuals that are actually pulling the strings on everything.
To be honest with you, I wish it was that, because that would be a lot easier to tackle. But what's actually happening, and the more research I do on this, it's kind of astounding to me, is that there are so many people actually that are working together to just remove people's individual freedom. We've talked a lot about people who have different, ways they want to raise their kids today, and we obviously see the world very differently. My main goal is to protect in this country, I can't do anything about every other country, but to protect people's individual rights to live a life they want for themselves. My enemy is the, let's call it a cabal, of people who want to prevent people from doing that. And that is when I talk about the Matrix, and I talk about concerns from everything from the climate agenda, not climate change doesn't exist, that's not my talking point, but my talking point is what is being utilized by folks at the top that don't care about you, that don't care about your wellness, the Eat Bugs campaign, get all the meat out of them, eat Beyond Meat, eat this fake meat, Bill Gates, with his big beer belly, and he's got bigger boobs than I do, talking about eating Beyond Meat. That's deeply threatening, and mostly because I do care about people's health and well-being, and if you don't have freedom and autonomy over your own health, you have nothing.
Right.
So
I honestly, I understand your concern for sure, and I do think, again, there's obviously a potential risk of the I guess it's elites,
happening.
Right?
It's not a risk. It's happening. It's happening
sure,
today.
and all I'm getting at is that yes, of course, the elites might have too much control or too much sway here, or what I just said, big companies being able to kind of influence governmental policies and whatnot. If you want to talk about corruption, of course that's a thing and that should be dealt with, and we should try and remove that crony capitalism.
It's not called corruption, though. That's the problem. There was a time when you could spot corruption.
Well, you said crony capitalism, right?
Yeah, right. True, but
so that
right
could be
now what you have is
should have more restrictions on capitalism.
What I'm talking about is what's happening now is you have hand-holding of, I remember a time when liberals, I say this all the time because I grew up in New York City around a bunch of liberals, and I remember a time when liberals were rebellious and liberals had problems with big pharma institutions and had problems with all of these things that they've now suddenly embraced. And I'm just sounding the alarm on, hey, whatever you want to do with your body. And this was my message, by the way, throughout the whole talk of the vaccine. But I said, do what you want. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I don't want you telling me what to do. But understand that these people in positions of authority, you have big pharma holding hands with big government who want to tell you what to do.
Right.
I don't know anything about your medical health history. I don't know anything about your health. I don't know anything about your risk factors. It's not my job, and it's not their job. So that's my goal when I talk about the Matrix. I'm trying to dismantle a very powerful system of people at the top who think they have a right to determine what your life looks like. Not even just my life, your life, your family. And I wish there were more folks on the left side of the spectrum that seem to care about that, because I'm not
Honestly,
seeing it.
if more people had like a nuanced approach to the Matrix thing, I think that it would be.
I don't know that I'm so nuanced, to be honest.
Well, compared to
Maybe
the conversations
you know
I've
what?
had,
My presentation might be.
it sounds
you
like
know.
what you're talking about is just corruption as a whole.
Well, yeah, and
a
it's-
form of crony capitalism, places where people are taking advantage of loopholes and influencing certain governmental policies or how people behave in ways that they shouldn't have that kind of power. I'm with you there. A lot of the times I take issue with the Matrix talk because of what people say about it. Usually it is talked about as if it's this cabal, and then you usually have to ask, well, who's making up that cabal?
Yeah.
And I think you know
Well,
where that goes.
take a look at Klaus Schwab. I mean, to be honest with you, and we'll close after this. Klaus Schwab, truthfully, reads like you couldn't create a better villain in like a horror movie. Like, just stick him in. In fact, you don't even have to adjust what he says. Just roll him on in there. Well, I want to thank you. I know we went long. I hope that's okay. We went 38 minutes over, but I had it planned for 2 hours. But I actually really enjoyed the conversation. I know we didn't agree on a lot of stuff, but thank you for coming here. Thank you for being willing to sit down at the table and have these conversations. And we'll definitely have an extent. Maybe we can do something remotely next time. I know it's a lot to come on out here, but I do appreciate it. I think the audience really liked it. And if nothing else, audience, remember, like, this is what this show's about. You know, it's about me. Yes, I come and rant and do everything you know how it is, but it's also about bringing people who see the world differently so that it gets you thinking and it keeps me thinking, and hopefully Hunter thinking as well. Hopefully
Got me thinking.
There you go. Thank you again. All right, audience, I'm going to be here. Oh, check this out, everyone. 2 things. Friday, there's a special panel coming. Oh yeah, it's hot. I'm going out to the live set, and I've got between 2 and 3 guests. I'm trying to confirm the third. We'll see how it goes, but it's going to be a panel, and it's going to be hot. It's going to be some of your favorite guys in the space. Secondly, Minect. Some of you have been asking me about Minect. Minect is a space where, remember, if you have a question for me that you don't want to put in the chat, you want to do a FaceTime with me, you want to call me on my phone, the message goes right to my phone, and you want to do a FaceTime where you got a question about your dating, relationship life, your job, whatever. Any topic that we cover here, any topic we don't cover here, you want to get my take on it. You're a parent, you want to put your kid in a school, you're worried about, I don't care what it is. Go on there, figure out what you want to do. You can send me a text message, we can do a FaceTime, whatever it is. So Minect, MINNECT.com. And I will be back here on Friday with some fun. Bye. Hunter, thank you.
Thanks again.
Bye.